And we'll get going. If you would turn on your microphones if they're not already on. Thank you. So folks online can hear us. I'm Zan Ojero, Board Chair, and we will go around the room with introductions.
Rachel McEnany, County Administrator.
Pat Malone, Commissioner.
Nancy Wise, Commissioner.
Lisa Short, City of Corvallis Transportation Services Supervisor.
Gary Stockoff, Public Works.
Vance Corning, County Council.
And online,
I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me all right?
yeah,
I'm Jeff Van Arsdal, Benton County Sheriff.
morning.
Laura Kwiatkowski, Board of Commissioners staff.
Morning, Maura.
Mariah De La Vega, Board of Commissioners Office staff.
Morning. I see we have one additional person, Andrew Brown. Okay, moving forward, review and approve the agenda. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? No. Okay, hearing none, we will move on to item 3.1, update on veterinary transit from Gary Stockhoff and Lisa Schiff.
Thank you, Commissioners. It's been a while since we've done a little update about Benton area transit. There's a lot going on with them, but I think I would like to start by saying what we're not going to talk about today or mention is budget problems. And I think that's a big change from when we started this process a few years ago, and we had that big deficit, and thankfully we've been able to address that. And part of that is, you know, efforts of Lisa and Brad and the staff to get that turned around and make some changes, but also obviously combining the funding sources at the state, and the transit tax has been a huge help in adding funds to the program. So that's been a real good thing. So that's nothing we're going to talk about other than we believe that in the upcoming legislative session, there will be a request, I think, and Lisa maybe cover that, to increase the transit tax a little bit, which again would add even more funding into the coffers for that. So 2-3 weeks ago, Vance and I and Rick Krager had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Harder and Robin Costa from Dilabus to cover several items. And it actually was, at the end of the day, a productive meeting. And I think some things were discussed that maybe they weren't aware of or hadn't really considered, but just go over the couple of them real quick that we can go fast. One is we have got their consumer price index increase for the contract established. That's 3.7%. That will be for the 24-25 year, and that's per the contract. So we chatted about that. I've got an amendment out to them now that talks about that and memorializes that, and then always also goes back and memorializes the change of going back to easy rides for the dispatch software. I think right now I saw Robin say he didn't have any issues with that, so we're waiting for their executive director to say it's okay, and then we'll process it for signature. Side note on the easy rides, since we went back to that, I think in mid-March, early March is when we went back. Really, we've had no comments, questions, concerns through the public, so that solved that. V is still there. We haven't made a decision on whether it would be implemented going forward at some point in the future, but for now, we are good with easy rides, and it'll be around for a couple of years before there's server issues with that. But they, as in Dilabus, did go get their own subscription to easy rides. So it is clearly off our server, which was the security risk that Adam had been concerned with having an outdated version of easy rides on our server. So that's taken care of. It's on the cloud with Dilabus and easy rides now. Back when we got our letter terminating our contract, and we got that resolved again because of the easy ride software. It was shortly thereafter they presented us with an invoice for work associated with having to try to come up with the VIA software. It amounted to $31,000, I think. And Vance clearly explained that that was not something in the contract and that we would not be able to pay that. So we got through that issue pretty quick. I don't think they liked the answer, but clearly the contract didn't have any provisions for that. So we were able to move past that issue. And then we went into the draft lease that had been prepared again, if you remember, 2017, maybe 18, the last lease with them expired. And there for several years, it was kind of a flat rate. And sometimes it'd get paid and other times it'd wait and we collect it later on. So it was kind of a hit and miss approach. And then 2 years ago, or a year ago, well, maybe it's going on 2 years now. Time kind of goes together after a while. We addressed the lease payments or the rental space payment for the office they occupy at Sunset with taking that money directly from the program funds that we receive, much like we do the fuel. When fuel was going crazy, it was hard for Dial-A-Bus to know, should it be this amount of money every month or this amount of money every month, and how that's structured into their payment. So to make it fair, predictable, we just took the fuel costs out upfront. We started doing that with the rental prices as well, the rental costs as well. But we do need a lease that sets the parameters if we have to have them vacate or anything like that. So working with Vance, we came up with a draft template for that. And then in conjunction with that, we also went out to try to figure out what that lease rate should be. How much should we charge them? And that kind of goes to something you all had raised before, which is how much has the county been subsidizing Dial-A-Bus for non-BAT related services? And back when we were having the budget issues 2 years ago, or they were having the budget issues, and with Rick's help, it came out to about 42% of their revenue was from non-BAT revenue. Basically, the school district is who their biggest revenue generator is. So that was the percentage I used with the different costs that we came up with. And I think at the end of the day, the proposed lease rate was about $3,700 a month. And goes to show you what we've been doing. And that's a pretty significant amount of money that they haven't really been paying for a while. I think there was some discussions about how that was crafted. I may have put in a parking space fee based on how many parking spaces they occupy. And apparently that's not something that's typical. But it would be covered in the overall lease rate. And I just broke it out separately. And I had no, I just took here you look like you take up 20 spaces. I drove through the parking lot one day. Here's how many Dial-A-Bus vehicles they have out there, and maybe a couple extra spaces in just the secured, well, it's not secured, it's the area where the buses are parked, and then came up with $20 a month or something like that. Maybe it's $40 a month, $40 a month per space. And I think if you've been anywhere where there's downtown parking or others, I think $40 per space per month is pretty cheap. They pushed back on that. And, again, I think the next meeting we have with them is tomorrow, and we'll just keep kind of working through the process of the lease and issues that are in the lease that they may have and the costs. But, I think part of this is what they're getting through our computers, support from IT, just the space itself. And again, they were able to run their school business really with no overhead costs. Is kind of what it amounted to. So that was part of something we wanted to try to capture exactly how much are we, or is the county kind of paying for them. So that's kind of where that lease rate came up with. And I'm sure it could, be a little bit here and there, but it was really just to show that there is a cost, and it's not free. I mean, I've heard many times, their director would say, well, it's not costing the county anything for us to do this service. Well, it actually is. And so I think that's part of this whole awakening thing of where we're at with our relationship with them, and what we're trying to do to improve that. At the end of the meeting, one of the concerns we had too was just discussions that maybe are outside of in the community and things are being said about the county. Mr. Krager very eloquently and professionally brought that issue up. I think it may have shocked a couple people, but yet I think at least one person I think was aware that that has been taking place. Less favorable discussions about us, the county. So at the end of the day, it was a productive meeting and we're going to keep working through that and working on that. At the same time, commissioners, we have to look to the future and how best to have Benton Area Transit operate in conjunction with our compadres at the city of Corvallis and CTS, because really we look at this, it's not CTS, it's not BAT, it's Benton Transit as a whole. I mean, how do we take care of the citizens in the county? And we're very much hooked, at the hip with this. And so one of the things that I believe that we've been tasked with is going back and looking at, well, what would it cost us to operate the program ourselves? Hire our own dispatchers, our own drivers, our own administrator, the whole thing, kind of make it its own group. I don't want to say it's been dysfunctional, but it's been a little strange over time. And it's worked, but I think it's time to really look at how do we do business and is there a better way? And I think Lisa can shed some light on some of her thoughts with just how they operate it, because there are changes coming. I think Tim Bates is retiring. She could go yesterday.
Yeah. Look at this smile.
And so really now is a really good time to do that. And the idea being that for us, we're getting ready to prepare another budget. And, how does that impact what we might do? The state's getting ready to do their 2-year budget, which goes back to the STIF funds and how that's all set up. I do have some information that I can start working on what it would cost. I did a rough guess on what it would cost to run it internally, and we could cover it. But obviously, that was me estimating on the really high side. Any new funds that we might get through the legislature with an increased transit tax would be obviously very helpful. But I think we could do that. But that's going to be a big change, a big lift in how we carry our business out. Where would it be? Who would it be? And all that. But that's, I think, part of this discussion. The other part is right now, just keeping the boat floating. We've been without Brad for a while.
December.
And so, I think we'd like to get that position retained, back up and get it moving. And it's not just for us, but it's, I think, just internally for Corvallis as well. And again, the transit for the whole area. But I think that's kind of where I'm at. I'll defer to Lisa now to maybe talk about the bigger picture, or if there's questions on anything that I've.
Yeah, couple, the 42% figure, was that the school district's part of Dial-A-Bus or?
It was, I mean, they may have a little bit here and there, but it really was almost all from the school district. And again, that was 2 years ago that number was in. I have no idea if that's still the number, but.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that. You guys may recall when, a few years ago, when they were trying to work through some of the financial challenges, questions in terms of the payment from the county to transit. We were trying to dive into them to understand, the costing models. What we found was that information just really wasn't there. They did not have a cost model. So we worked with them actually to build their own cost model for them so that they could represent exactly what the breakout of county cost versus other costs and primarily school districts. So it was mostly exercise. Brad and this was really helpful to kind of look at data in terms of drivers and the amount of time spent. And what we found on average, the amount of time spent around 42%. So it became sort of a rebuild cost. And then 42% of it becomes sort of the school or I'll just say other costs. in West Bowie County. So that's how we came about it. It's not a model that they probably have continued to maintain. It's something that we certainly could always update, but I have to believe that, that was all based on driver hours, relatively close. So that's what our basis has been today.
And you talked about the subsidy. When I was new on the board 5 years ago, Bill Kirby did some checking around and figured out that several hundred, that the county was subsidizing several $100,000 a year, and nobody knew about it. And so when you talk about the current subsidy, that's nothing new. They've been going on for a decade or
More.
and with a fair amount of effort to try to right size that and make sure, like we're doing on all our departments, whether it's fleet or how much does it cost us, what's the revenue, are we breaking even or subsidizing, and do we want to continue to do that? So
I will say one thing that's maybe lessened the subsidy over time has been changes that Lisa brought to our attention, like third-party trips, services outside of the hours that we're required to put. And so pulling those back in have kind of started at least right-sizing our service model a lot better. But we also got a lot of pushback because we were taking things away that now is perceived as you're not providing us with services when they were services that shouldn't have been probably extended to begin with. So that's something another step we're getting ready to do is Lisa and I will meet with their staff, talk about the service hours, and are those still meeting the needs? What's the ridership? How many rides do we have here? As we look at right sizing things, do we have the right routes in the right place at the right time?
Yeah. Sorry. Oh, no, I just wanted to kind of finish, I'm sorry.
No,
I wanted
go
to
ahead.
finish that thought that the last 4 years, I think it was right at the beginning of the pandemic, January, I want to say of 2020, when Gary referred to earlier about just the kind of financial crisis, we started this whole process of really bringing, I think, the service back into county control. It had just been at the whim of the contractor who was, performing a good service for the community, but it wasn't meeting the needs and the limits that the resources that the county had for the program. So it's been painful for sure. I know you've all heard from, many people about that, but when I speak a little bit later, I can bring you the perspective of running another transit agency with another contractor and how very different those two
Well, thank you for bringing that up, but I think, change is hard, right? So I can see from their point of view, it caused some emotions and hard feelings. So I'm glad that Rick and that you all talked about the negative comments that have been going around. I think that's very important. It's gotten back to me from people that have no clue that I even have any role or the county has any role, and I just, we gave them free money. We gave them ARPA dollars. And usually when you give people a bunch of money or a gift, they say thank you. And so it was a very different reaction. So I hope that we can kind of work together to, have a good relationship and say nice things about each other out in public and not the opposite.
I think an awful lot of it is the legacy of the founding of Dial-A-Bus as a purely volunteer enterprise based out of the senior center. And when the county first invited them in and they became the contractor for paratransit services, they continued that same philosophy. And as long as they had enough volunteers to make that model work, the shoe didn't pinch. But then that changed with the aging of the volunteer pool and COVID.
big time. So, this problem has been brewing over a very long period of time. And yes, the community became very accustomed to the services that a nonprofit unencumbered by federal and state regulations could provide. But now that they're funded primarily by federal and state money, it doesn't work anymore. So it's just a different model. And it's painful. It's really painful.
Yep. Agreed. I mean, you said a chunk of what I was going to say is that, the funding model, we just don't have the option of running this kind of, well, we just sort of do what we feel like. And we just can't do that.
Lisa, I have a comment and question. You're going to talk a little bit about an experience where you felt the model worked well. And I know we're doing a little bit, we're in the early stages of looking at how other counties provide this service, whether it's in-house or exterior. Can you talk a little bit more about a different model that you came from that you thought worked better and why?
Well, it's the other piece of my job currently, which is running the city's transit system, and it is contracted, it's not in-house. Can I assume that you've all seen city buses running around the community? Do you know who our contractor is? No. MTR Western has always understood their place as our contractor, and their name doesn't appear anywhere on the vehicles. And anytime they talk about the service, it's Corvallis Transit System. We have a very good partnership. When there are issues operationally, they come and speak to Tim Bates, typically our transit coordinator. They work it out collaboratively. They would never, ever just go do something and then we would find out about it later. So I would just say it's a very healthy contractor public agency relationship. And we've had ups and downs for sure. To the point where we actually looked at what would it take to take the service in-house. And I actually went through an exercise I've shared with Gary in case it's helpful to him about what an organizational structure could look like to model what the contractor is providing. In the case of the city's contractor on the fixed route buses, those drivers are union, paid union wages. They're in the Amalgamated Transit Union. And so they're paid significantly more than dial-a-bus drivers. So the cost of the city doing that service it was very comparable, I will say, to provide that service with ASME employees versus ATU employees. And I don't know how that'll turn out because dial-a-bus employees are not paid at quite the same level. So I also know of another city and another county in the state that contract. And I just think the relationship the county has had with its contractor is a real one-off. I've never seen a contractor that really didn't understand, I don't mean to say its place, but really its role in the relationship, which is to provide the service that the county is asking for it to provide under the terms of the contract. It's just that cut and dry. It does involve services that affect people's lives in a very personal way, so it feels very personal to people. They get to know their drivers. And, it's different than, say, a janitorial contractor.
Well, dial-a-bus has not operated the service as a typical paratransit service.
Right.
It has been operated more as a transportation as social service.
Social service. Exactly.
And so their understanding of the service is very different than the county's understanding of the service. And that is the source of the friction. And we've changed our demands. And so I think that delta is important to understand because that's what the community hears about. And but if that's what the community needs and wants, it needs to be provided another way. And that's, I think, where the friction comes in. They're trying to raise monies for that service, and so
And it goes to your other comment too, Commissioner, in that now that we have the state and federal funding, we have some rules that we have to live by, even to the point of the CDL changes. Now to get a CDL license, it's onerous, it's expensive. And so we have certain vehicles that are of the size that a CDL
Yeah.
is required. And I can say that from what I know about what they pay their CDL drivers, there's probably not many that are going to go to work for that rate. And because of the model they've counted on for all these years being volunteer based, and volunteerism in that respect it's on the decline. So, the model may have worked, but the fact of the matter is we have to live within certain rules, and to be able to attract drivers to be competitive with MTR or hiring these other ones that have a higher wage, I think that's what we have to look at. And then being fiscally responsible with the funds that we provide to our contractor, because I think that was some of the issues we had before. We would write them a check every month.
Regardless,
And we had no idea. Accountability really wasn't high on the list, and that's bad on us. I mean, and we're trying to obviously make that change. And I know that ODOT, who we report to in a lot of these, is pleased with the progress we've made. We still have things to fix, but they are pleased with the progress we've made over the last few years.
If I can just say one more thing about that, the phrase that the state and federal agencies use when it comes to this service is that contractor stands in our shoes. And so they are the county for the purposes of operating that. So what they do and don't do is immediately reflective on the county in the eyes of the regulators. So it really matters that we have good oversight and control.
If I might just, I guess I might just echo what was said earlier. I too had never really quite witnessed a contract quite like this for the county. Of course, was very concerning, as Gary alluded to, treated a little bit more grant-like versus contract-like. And I think when we started those conversations back, that's what we were trying to move towards. And again, to Gary's point, these are federal and state grants. They trump what we can use those dollars for. And we put them into the contracts for risk and inspection. I recognize and certainly appreciate the great work Dial-A-Bus does for the community and as a nonprofit organization. That is terrific, and we all want to applaud that. At the same time, this is a client. I don't want to be overly bureaucratic here, but this is a contract for services, and we want to ensure that it's being used appropriately in terms of the grant money that supports it. So again, I want to just reiterate everything Lisa and Gary have said. It's a difficult discussion, but certainly we have to move forward. And I still believe we can have valuable services here through a contract.
Just what's the current contract? Remembering that it started last July, is that correct?
So the 3-year limit, it would expire on June 30th of 26. So that's kind of part of this too, is budget wise, contract wise. We think if we wanted to look going internal, we need to give ourselves plenty of time to look at it, get it placed, get folks hired. And so our goal would be, if we went that route, that we would go look for July 1st of 26 as starting that. In the meantime, obviously, we're still working and trying to hopefully resolve this, because the existing contract does allow us to do 1-year extensions for 2 extra years, or a 5-year contract. Or we could also at that time go out for another one, but we just had not been successful at attracting any other proposers other than Dial-A-Bus.
I just want to emphasize what Gary said about the 2-year period. I know that may seem like, oh gosh, that's a long time, but this is not small undertaking if we were to take this on, and it needs to be done really well in terms of understanding what costs are, what are our risk, what are the things that we don't anticipate. obviously Corvallis has lots of experience in dealing with this, but it's, again, no small undertaking. And this is something we have to start now.
Yeah.
We need to start building on that, regardless of where we end up. We're going to be prepared for it. It's going to take a good 2 years.
There are also consulting firms out there that specialize in transit that we could bring on if we wanted to do an outside analysis.
I was gonna go just through a couple of other things,
Mhm.
if this is a good time for that. One more thing I wanted to say that's very pertinent about this is that through the whole exercise that Rick and Gary have spoken about, that was 2 years ago, where I think we met every month for 8 or 9 months. It
Mhm.
seemed like
Yeah.
I turned around and it was another, 2-hour meeting. We discovered through mostly Rick's analysis, Rick and Brad, that more of the rides being provided through this service were paratransit rides for the city than we realized. And so we also kind of right-sized the amount that the city was paying the county for that service as well. And related to that, all the angst that has happened over the switch to the new dispatching system, and most of the people that we've heard from that are unhappy because they used to be able to get rides early in the morning on a certain day that we don't have paratransit service, and we trimmed all that back. They're really, through Benton County, they're really city of Corvallis clients, if you will.
Mhm.
And so, I feel like just a higher sense of obligation, and yet the county has had all the pain,
Yes.
the feedback for it, and yet it's really about the city's portion of the program, which is unfortunate, just, that that isn't a little more shared, but. So one of the, we've explored a lot of things, and having Brad's position vacant is an opportunity to look at, is the program structured right? With Tim retiring, what if the city took its part of the program back? Well, I say back, I don't think we've ever had it. I think since inception, the county has operated the demand response service for this on behalf of the city and on behalf of the county itself. So what if the city operated its paratransit service, not in-house per se, but through its own contracting? What would that look like? And it's one of the reasons that we just haven't filled the position, is because it was just a chance to explore some different things. With Tim retiring, I think I can see a need for, in both of these programs, for both operational, like Tim this morning was out in Philomath setting up detour notices for the Philomath connection, because the city operates that for Philomath, because ODOT's doing work and things are changing. So there's daily operational things, but then there's thinking about the service, planning it. I've talked to Commissioner Malone about the service on Research Way, we changed that. So they're kind of two different things. And we've asked one person, Brad over here and Tim over here, to do all the thinking for their respective programs. So I've been putting a lot of thought into it. And it is one of the reasons we haven't proceeded with the recruitment. And Gary and I have been talking a lot. I've been talking with my managers at the city. And last week I provided them an analysis of the city's transit program and what it looks like now. What would it look like if we had the paratransit program sort of in our wheelhouse, if you will? And that was just last week. So I don't have a response to that yet. I think the arrangement, the way we had it, was working well. I think I feel like finally getting somewhere with contractor and the branding of the program, and just creating that visibility that we've wanted for a long time. So more to come. I don't really know where that's going to land. It's not really my decision, to be honest. Just programmatically, we are in what I call a stiff year, where the stiff committee is going to be meeting, statewide transportation improvement fund committee. Gary referred to the funds merging. That happened in the last cycle. So we don't have to work through that like we did last time. We do have a new committee. So we've had some kind of orientation to do there. And we'll be putting the stiff plan together and soliciting projects, all that kind of stuff this fall. You'll eventually see either late year or very early next year. Proposed projects. Gary also referred to the legislative, the legislature is currently on a roadshow. They've had one in Portland, and I think Tillamook is next, and then Albany. And I sit on the statewide, the Oregon Transit Association. I sit on the board of that, and we have paid lobbyists who do work on behalf of the association. And our lobbyists are very involved. They were very involved, I might say, actually responsible for the transit tax that went into effect in 2017. And so they're very involved in pitching some sort of proposal for the transit tax increase in the next legislative session in the transportation bill. So on behalf of public transit, I am the captain of the Albany meeting from a transit perspective, just public transit, not because it is open to all other, transit generally. So I'd like to speak a little further about how that looks at the meeting. And what else? From a service perspective, we have 3 new minivans that recently arrived. I have a meeting today to talk with operations supervisor at Dial-A-Bus and similar position at Lincoln County to talk about Coast Valley service and how we might modify that a little bit to better meet the schedule. We did finally get vehicles, and our partner got the vehicles for the 99W pilot project, which, oh my gosh.
3 years?
It's been a long time.
Is it over yet, or?
I'll be connecting with my partner in Yamhill County about that. And let's see if we can get that off the ground. Every time we have a stiff committee meeting, our representative from Monroe says, "When are we going to get that, sir?"
I hear it from Monroe too. I think they just gave up.
Yeah, Janice is very consistent.
Yes,
Yeah.
she is. Yeah. So those are kind of my basic program updates.
On the 99W on the service, any idea of start timeline?
We have the vehicles. That was a big one. I mean, and I don't think Yamhill County had theirs. I think we got ours first, and then
We did.
she just got hers. So, it has been a real challenge, and I have partners around the state who still are cutting service because they can't get drivers. I mean, still. So CTS had to really boost the wage for CDL drivers to fill our service out. I mean, I think we operated without weekends for a year or something, which was, just devastating, really, to me. So I don't know. I mean, I'm a little concerned about Dial-A-Bus's ability to recruit drivers. I don't know.
Yeah. I can say I welcome the exploration of changing the model. I think that it's time to think about that, whether it's, just Corvallis Transit taking over the paratransit contract for Corvallis geography, or something more significant and a change within the Benton area transit piece as well. I think that we've just got to be able to put together the service in an efficient and effective way that meets the needs. It's not going to meet everyone's needs. And I'm still, I've got this other piece over here, the social service side. But it may well be that an area that Dial-A-Bus can actually benefit from the new social determinants of health or health-related social needs funding coming from the CCO. Maybe that's a way that they can cover some of those rides. I don't know. There are all kinds of things to think about.
Yeah, I definitely have been thinking, as we discovered where our county vehicles were going.
Yeah.
I think there's a real place for Dial-A-Bus as a nonprofit outside of their contract with the county
Mhm.
to
I
fill those
fully
gaps.
agree.
And I don't think they've really seen it that way. They just kind of see it as the whole thing is their program, but it's not. Most of it is, well, some 58% of it or whatever is the county's program. And then there's this unmet need that I think they can
Yeah.
step
I agree.
in. Yeah.
And there's potential for better collaboration with folks over at COG too. Because they have different funding sources and can do some of the crossing county lines that we can't do.
Right.
So it's interesting, but there needs to be more coordination for that to happen. And the other, I looked over the IGA recently and, you know, that's clearly quite out of date. It doesn't refer to the latest legislative changes and with all the restructuring, and I'm expecting that you all will be bringing us a revised intergovernmental agreement between Corvallis and Benton County at some point.
Sure. Yeah, I think we revamped it, I don't know how many years ago now, and just basically we just,
Yeah,
we don't have.
it just
to, like,
rolls over year
It
to year.
just kind of
Yeah.
rolls over, but yeah, it hasn't, I can't say it's been looked at.
Yeah.
in-
I
It's
think
been
last
since
year we just did an
2019.
amendment.
Yeah, that sounds about
We
right.
just amended the costs and that
Yes.
was it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For cost.
yep. Yeah. Other questions for Lisa and Gary?
Just a comment, I appreciate instead of like replacing Brad or doing a piecemeal approach, to try to look at the whole system and figure out who's best suited for different parts of services.
Yeah, it's just hard to be a jack of all trades.
Mhm.
People tend to be good at, certain things, and in transit operations, most transit agencies, when they get to a certain size, have, daily operations people, and then people that think about
Strategy.
strategy, planning, long-term funding, grant management, those things.
Is there anything else you need from the county?
I think so.
Okay.
I will say the electric vehicles, so I think things are moving forward with that. So sometime, hate to even guess, but say late 25-ish, mid 25s, we would have our vehicles, which are 6 all-electric vehicles, 4 smaller ones in the minivan next size up, and then 2 larger ones. So, and those will replace 6 existing gas burners or diesel burners. And then we're also still tracking with the charging station. So in that case, ODOT has been very helpful. FTA has been very helpful in giving us kind of the window that we can make the deadline that FTA imposed and be able to use those funds. So we are moving forward with that. We've hired PBS to do the NEPA survey, which if you break ground at all, you have to do the survey. So, but we think we'll be pretty good because there's not a lot of intrusion in that respect. So
Gary, that was 1 minivan, 2 sedans, 3 sedans?
it's 4 minivans, sort of, and then 2 that are like 15 passenger, 18, a little bit larger. Category D are the larger vehicles. We're getting 2 of those. And then 4 of the category E, which are the smaller ones, which a lot of the stuff we do around town, especially the minivans are good, but they'll all be upfitted with ADA ramps and stuff. Yeah. So, and I apologize for the phone call. I actually have a new granddaughter that arrived this morning in Pennsylvania. So they were trying to, I'm sure, FaceTime me and
We should get you out of here so you can take that call.
it's, another grandchild.
Who's counting?
That's number 21.
Is it a little boy or girl?
Little girl, yeah, little girl. So,
And the charging station will be over at Sunset?
correct, yeah, right where all the facilities are. So, that's the other thing, just real quick, if that would be the basis of our operations, because it is a good facility. It's got the big parking lot. And so if we go on our own, then we would be there and that of us would have to figure out a place to then move to. And that's why the lease is very important, that we get that nailed down so that everybody knows responsibilities and expectations.
Mhm. So what are the next steps in terms of analysis?
Well, I'm going to try to find a company because that's, Rick suggested you all, that we have somebody to kind of help us shepherd this along. We do have contacts with Cinda in Tillamook because Lincoln, they run their own. We have a couple cities that run their own. And so I think that's just kind of guiding it, but we don't know what we don't know.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so I think to really do a thorough analysis, we will be asking for some help.
I know that Lane had issues with their paratransit provider for several years as well. So they've had some similar experiences.
Yeah, I haven't really been in touch with them. I know City of Sandy did as well.
Mhm.
So for a brief time, City of Sandy took their whole service in-house for 6 months or so, which I can't even imagine how they did that, and then put it back out.
Mhm. Okay,
Thank you.
well, if there are no other questions, thank you very much. And congratulations, Gary, to your daughter. Okay, next up, we have Toby Lewis, Laurel Byer, and Jesse Ott talking to us about the ESA compliance for the National Flood Insurance Program and the comments that we owe back to. Thank you for this very last minute. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to come in today. I know it was a last minute meeting and also the opportunity to submit that. At the last minute.
No, I know that you guys just met, so it's not
Yes,
like
we
they
did.
have a lot of time. So I just appreciate you getting it to us.
Yeah, hopefully you at least got it in time to look at it a little bit. So just to.
No, we have not, just,
Okay.
so.
Okay,
You want
well,
to
then I
walk through
will-
it, that's great.
We'll work right through it.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so back in July, Benton County entered into an agreement with FEMA to be a cooperating agency for reviewing draft documents for the Endangered Species Act and compliance for the National Flood Insurance Program. FEMA recently released 2 draft documents to cooperating agencies and for review and comment. And the comments are due back the end of today for the draft model ordinance. They're due back on the 17th for the environmental impact statement. So those are the 2 documents that they released. The next, and also FEMA expects to release some additional draft documents throughout the summer. Once all of those draft documents are finalized by FEMA, they will publish those for public review and comment, and then finalize that. So the expectation currently is that sometime late 2024, 2025 is when that public release of the draft documents will be provided. And then after the public comment period, which will be about 75 days, then the documents will be published in their final form. And after that's done, then local governments will be expected to implement either regulations or follow whatever the final guidance is on how to ensure that development in floodplains is not creating a loss of protected habitat. So the draft documents that we have today, that we're finalizing review of today, are the environmental draft environmental impact statements. So that one describes the regulatory context. It also talks about the purpose for the, what's trying to be accomplished. Basically, the end goals are guiding development away from the most sensitive habitat areas in floodplains, mountain floodplains, reducing impacts of new development and redevelopment on mountain flood hazard areas, and strengthening systems of accountability to track and report on implementation of these requirements. The key floodplain and habitat functions that are being protected are occupied space, water quality and riparian vegetation. So for occupied, or, I'm sorry, not occupied, unoccupied sites, no flood hazard. So that's measured in a volume. So from the ground to the water height during a 100-year flood event, that space, if it's not already occupied, the goal is to keep it open for protected fish species use is as needed. Water quality, they're using the amount of impervious surface as a metric for measuring that. So not creating any new impervious surface within the flood hazard is basically the standard. If impervious surface is offset the impacts of that. And then riparian vegetation, the metric for measuring that is trees with at least a 6-inch diameter measured at breast height. And so if trees are being removed, then that are that size, the expectation is that they're being replaced, usually at a higher ratio to ensure that the trees will survive. The draft environmental impact statement identifies 4 alternatives that are being considered. One is the baseline, so if nothing changes, these are the expected impacts. The alternative 2 and 3 are very similar. Basically, jurisdictions would need to adopt regulations in some form or fashion or show that they already have them in place to ensure that the no net loss standards are being met. The difference between those two is that alternative 2 allows for what we currently do in Benton County, where if an applicant is getting a permit from a federal agency that goes through that ESA compliant, Endangered Species Act compliance review, that could be used as documentation that the project is compliant with these standards. And so the project wouldn't have to go through the new adopted no net loss regulations in the jurisdictions code. Alternative 3 doesn't allow for that exception. So even if your project would go through that Endangered Species Act compliance review, it would still need to be reviewed for the no net loss standards. The kind of key difference between the current ESA Endangered Species Act review in those federal permits and the no net loss regulations is related to the tree replacement. So from what I understand, it sounds like the tree replacement is maybe not such a big part of that, or maybe not even a component of that Endangered Species Act review currently. It may be in the future, but I'm not entirely certain. And so there may be additional requirements on those projects that are already being reviewed for Endangered Species Act compliance that would be applied if alternative 3 is what ends up being. And then alternative 4 is, instead of local jurisdictions being required to adopt floodplain, or I'm sorry, no net loss regulations, each project would be required to submit a habitat assessment. And so that would allow for, well, I'll get into that in a minute, but so it'd be a project by project review. It's an outside party that would be reviewing those and then providing a determination for that project of what, if any mitigation is required, and if so, what would be required. Based on reading through that document and conversations yesterday, we're looking at alternative 4 as a preferred alternative. We won't actually have a choice over that. It'll be FEMA and NOAA Marine Fisheries that are having that conversation and making a decision about which alternative Oregon will be required to comply with as a state. But our hope is leaning slightly more towards alternative 4 because it does allow for site-specific consideration of impacts and mitigation, tailored mitigation options. And that type of review or something similar to it would also be required under alternative 2 or 3 when you go through the development code, you know, the no net loss regulations that would be required to be adopted under the other 2 alternatives. It would require the county to be able to review those habitat assessments and determine whether or not they meet the requirements. The request would be to FEMA would be that there be training and outreach and guidance on, what goes into a habitat assessment, who can complete them? Is it something that a
Yes.
property owner can complete
Yeah.
themselves? Do they have to hire somebody? If so, what are the qualifications? And also what training does, guidance for staff on what we need to look at. Whoever ends up reviewing those to determine whether or not they're adequate or they contain that. information. But it seems like that type of review would allow for a much more tailored approach for each individual project. And it would be something that would be considered anyway in developing a project. So second favorite option was alternative 2, because it does allow for that, allow for use of an already existing permit review to document compliance with the Endangered Species Act. Alternative 2 opens up 4 pathways for communities. The no net loss standards that would be adopted into a community's code would be a little more generalized, and so you wouldn't get that super tailored look at a project. But it does identify requirements, and there's going to be requirements regardless. So the 4 path options that alternative 2 or 3 would lay out. Path A would be adopting the model ordinance language just verbatim. Whatever it says, a community could just choose to adopt that. Path B is showing that your jurisdiction already has code language in place that meets the same standards or achieves the same outcomes, and that would be a review that would be between the jurisdiction and FEMA. Path C is more of a tailored method that can be used in certain areas of a community, an entire community, looking at, whether or not the idea of a riparian buffer zone needs to be 170 feet, or if it could be reduced down farther, something less than that, depending on.
Having it different on Greasy Creek than on
Yes.
St. Mary's.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And, some communities have floodplains mapped that are not really connected to a water source. I was talking to somebody the other day in a different jurisdiction, and she said that some of their floodplains are just a circle on a hilltop because they're like an irrigation pivot. And it got mapped that way. So things like that, a community could say, okay, this one isn't necessarily protecting any endangered species. So, but that would be a review that, taking a really close look at your mapped floodplains in the community and identifying which ones need that extra review and which ones don't. Thank you for coming to Adam. Adam has also been on our review group. And then path D is a habitat conservation. So a community or, a group of communities could get together and develop a habitat conservation plan and go through that review, similar to what we have in place for the Thunder's Blue Butterfly, where you look at your community as a whole and decide how much, what the expected impacts are, and then plan for that impact so that those activities can continue to happen and set up that way. So that's the environmental impact statement document. The draft model ordinance document, I've kind of touched on that a bit. Basically, the language that's being added. So there is a Oregon model floodplain ordinance, which we've already gone through with FEMA. We updated our floodplain ordinance a couple years ago to mirror the layout of that so that it was easier for the reviews. So the proposal is to add the no net loss requirements into that draft floodplain ordinance because it's all applying to floodplain standard, floodplain areas. The goals of those no net loss standards are to first avoid impacts to habitat. And then if they can't be avoided, to minimize the effects of a development on that protected habitat. And then once you've gone through those two, then look at if there's anything still remaining, mitigating that. So it's broken down into the three categories: protecting unoccupied space, not increasing impervious surfaces, and not removing trees, or at least replacing the ones they removed. There are several exempt activities listed in there, and then there's some information about the riparian buffer zone, just in terms of projects that are specifically and exclusively for habitat enhancement, habitat restoration. Those types of things are proposed to be exempt in the no net loss standards, but only if they are exclusively for those goals. So if they include extra things like a storage shed or something like that for equipment, for maintenance, then that wouldn't qualify. So there are some sideboards on it, but there are some plans to exempt all those activities. Some of the considerations that we were talking about yesterday were the potential for off-site mitigation. You know, what would that look like when it's being implemented? You know, as we're looking at permit reviews, if somebody doesn't have space on their property to mitigate on site, then they're going to need to ask their neighbors or somebody nearby if they can mitigate on a different property. And so what does that look like when permit reviews are being done? What does it look like for enforcement of multi-year installation, you know, restoration projects, in terms of mitigating, like if somebody needs to remove trees to build their house and they need to restore them, then what are we looking at in terms of enforcing that requirement? The functionality of stormwater detention and retention structures in flood hazard areas during a flood event, so they don't really function that well while there's water in them from floods. And so what does that look like? The ability to implement improvements for travel routes, for fire, life, and safety reasons, emergency vehicle access, as well as vehicular, pedestrian, bicycle traffic.
So stream crossings, basically, that's a good one.
Widening undersized roads and things like that. So, and then thinking about accommodating other environmental concerns. So things like preventative measures to address disease vegetation, and removal of vegetation for defensible space around structures. So if you have a house in the floodplain, you've got larger trees around it, you want to remove those, then you're looking at adding more trees farther out, but is there space on the property to do that and still maintain that space? And things like beaver mitigation and coexistence measures. So those were some of the things that came up yesterday. And at this point, I think I'll open it up for questions, thoughts, comments.
Well, those are all good questions. One of the questions I have is in terms of the exempt activities, does it exempt ag the way ag is exempted now? Okay, so that's still a huge exemption. Okay.
Yes. And it's specific, so it exempts standard agricultural processes as well as ditch maintenance, plowing. It calls out that specifically as well, as long as you're not rechanneling your ditches or changing the way the water is flowing on the property. So, the other thing that it added in there that I haven't seen before was silviculture practices.
So that's trees.
They also call that,
And the other question is, in terms of the potential for offsite mitigation, I can envision some sort of riparian mitigation banking emerging, if this really does emerge as an approach with teeth, and perhaps an opportunity to truly enhance some wetland areas, and not wetland areas, but riparian areas for salmon habitat.
Yeah, and so something
I
like.
think Adam has a
that-
comment on that too.
Huh?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
You don't need to use that,
Oh, yeah, okay. I really want to.
You may, that'll amplify your voice in the room, but in terms of the people being able to hear us online, it's these little videos.
Okay, perfect. So Adam Stebbins, Benton County Natural Resource Coordinator.
The red light on, sorry, on the top. There you go.
But yeah, that's for in the room, yeah.
Want me to put that, yeah.
Started being late, it's busy field season, fun with machines and stuff like that the last couple of days, so appreciate having some grace there. So I really appreciate Toby tackling this. She's been on top of this for what, almost, when did we start talking about this? Like a decade ago?
2011?
Yeah.
Long time ago.
So when I started talking with Toby about this, I was in development, part-time and in public works, and it was the riparian ordinance time period, the stormwater code implementation, all that kind of fun stuff. So now we're in this point, you know, where I've fully wrapped my head around it with Jesse and of course with Toby's attention to the details, where it's definitely viable on that option under the Habitat Conservation Plan, but again, the devil's in the details
Yeah.
on what are they considering incidental take permit and what level of documentation. The HCP has run very smoothly once we got legs under it. But, you know, 90% of the HCP is in upland, upland prairies. You know, the only wetland, flood-related area is at Jackson Fraser Wetland, which has undergone massive amount of work and hoping to do even more work out there. So it would be pretty new to add that in. And again, what are all the details that FEMA and the agencies would want to see within that? But if it is a viable pathway, it seems like as far as the ESA goes, as I wrap my head around this, with what, everything we do at the county, and I was talking with, you know, Laurel a little bit, and then a lot with Rich, Spofford and the road crew the last couple of days. And, you know, I think what we all want to see is like, what's the most efficient, effective pathway without some extensive monitoring, documentation process. And those of us that were around when HCP was developed, which a lot of people in this room, you know, a lot of that was thought through so that we could break it down into metrics that roll up at a scale and a level where it's not such a fine scale focus and documentation process that it's too cumbersome to implement. So it'd have to be developed as far as what those metrics are and at what scale the agencies want to see it.
Yeah.
But that incidental take permit's already pushed through, it's already existing. And then, you know, how do you explain that to the community that would be impacted? Because again, those of us that were around during the riparian stuff, that's a very hot button issue because you're talking about property rights, what people can and can't do within stream zones. So that's how I'm seeing all this.
Yeah, I think that once the environmental impact statement is out for review, it will be a very hot button topic. So I'm grateful to have the opportunity to think about it in advance. And I could foresee with the habitat assessment approach that it would also probably generate quite a few new local consulting businesses that specialize in this kind of assessment. It will make projects more expensive. The goals are lofty and important, but yeah, it will have a lot of effects. So I agree with all of your questions about, you know, in terms of implementation considerations, and I think it's good to raise them. So thank you for doing that.
Well, yeah, and at this point, you know, FEMA is just asking for feedback on where they're going with the.
Yes.
We don't have to pick a path right
No.
now. We don't have to pick an option. The alternatives, 1 through 4 will be chosen for the state of Oregon.
Yes.
So one of those will be picked at some point at a higher level, and then
Mhm.
it'll be rolled out. But depending on what's chosen, we may need to implement some of the standards in the draft model ordinance. We may, and if that's the case, then we have 4 options to go through, and we can kind of pick and
Mhm.
choose and find what works best. And so we'll have time to really evaluate what will seem like what we hope will be.
Mhm. Yeah. Sounds good.
No, I know.
Have you been talking at all to the others, Umatilla and Tillamook, about their responses?
So I would have loved to have had conversations with them in the last couple of weeks. I did not have an opportunity. I was out all last week for graduation stuff. But,
Mhm.
I was planning on checking in with Sarah.
Yeah.
I did have a chance to speak with Deanna at Deanna Wright at Department of Land Conservation and Development. She said that she had several comments on both documents that she was submitting.
Mhm.
Did Laurel, Jesse, did you guys want to add anything?
I think you did a great job summarizing everything. Like we talked about yesterday, is I'm mostly concerned about my ability to do projects anymore,
Yeah.
No new impervious surface is huge, especially when we have roads that really need to be widened in floodplains due to safety concerns. So how do we mitigate? Where do we mitigate? It just adds another level there to permit requirements for us. In bridge, there's something in there too. No piles shall be used in the floodplain. It's like, well, what if I'm taking out piles? Isn't that okay? So there's some questions on really applicability, and then also how it's going to be interpreted and how we interpret it in our code to make sure it meets those requirements.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Yeah, and I would say it will make every project more expensive.
It will.
We're getting around that, so, see that, but I don't see anything that stops natural areas and parks from being able to continue a lot of the work. But it does affect a lot, especially the stuff where we kind of interface with bridges and access and places to get near some of those spots. So that's a big deal.
Mhm. Well, good. Thank you for raising all of the issues. I hope it makes a difference in FEMA's process.
Right, yeah.
I hope they listen. Yeah.
So the idea is that at some point this will be imposed on the state, but we're trying to yes, get the most best specifics for our county.
Yeah, I mean, for Benton County, but also just in terms of general applicability and, FEMA is really trying to work with the agencies and jurisdictions that are going to have to implement this. Part of the process is just based on the way the process is set up. Part of it is they have to come up with these draft documents and this draft information so that they can publicly release it. We, right now, as a cooperating agency, have access to those documents as they're being developed, and so we provide feedback. And hopefully that will help the official draft release be better informed, because it gives feedback for what it looks like for implementation. There's a higher level idea for how, this regulation seems like it'd be a great fit, but then having the local jurisdictions like Umatilla County, Tillamook County, Benton County, and City of Portland look at that and say, okay, well, when we have to use that information and apply it to a project and we're talking to an applicant, is this really workable? Are there ways that, are there things that should be adjusted, or this sounds great in theory, but doesn't work in practice? And so that's really what FEMA's looking for feedback on right now is, is there anything jumping out at people that's like, this is not gonna work, or have you considered this upgrade yet?
And Commissioner Ogerow brought up cost, and that's whether it's a house or a bridge, seems like that. Gotta have some motion. Folks know that if we do this, then it's 5% of the cost of the project, or and is it worth it? Getting enough benefit out of this particular rule to justify the cost.
ESA has no such provision in it for cost benefit analysis is the bottom line. And so the Endangered Species Act is all about protecting that habitat. And that's a proposal that the Republican Party has made, however, to change the ESA, and that hasn't made it through. So.
Commissioner, I had a fault. So that's kind of where I'm more front side focused is when it gets to the implementation, because that's where we provided the immense value to the property owner.
Yeah.
Through the HCP, because they don't have to go through the consultation, and we have the ability to mitigate.
So if we were to go the HCP route, it would definitely take some of the onus off of property owners. It would take a lot of the onus off of property
Yeah, and
owners. It's a heavy
time
lift.
and money for sure.
Yeah, it's a heavy lift to get it up and going, but it is definitely a
Yeah, you have to have
smart way to go.
some site regionally identified
Yeah.
where you can use for mitigation.
Exactly.
right? So it's,
And that would allow that for that kind of county level mitigation bank in essence. Yeah. It is an attractive approach.
So, if it turns out that alternative 2 or 3 is chosen, habitat conservation plan is certainly an option. Then we'd be looking at those 4 paths, A, B, C, and D. So having to have that conversation about which path the county wants to.
So an HCP would not be an option under the option 4.
No, so that would, we probably could. I don't see why we couldn't, we could do it anyway.
Yeah.
And that would certainly be an option as well. I will double check.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam, for clarifying what you were saying before about being a strong fan of the HCP approach.
Like you said, it is a huge upfront investment, but now the property owners, especially now, they have high level of benefit.
Yep, agreed. Any other questions? Okay, well, I appreciate all of your work on this. I know that we are less resistant to this in Benton County than some counties are, so I appreciate the really constructive nature of the feedback. To FEMA. Thank you. Oh, yes.
Laura, yeah.
But Laura, before you leave.
Put me on the spot.
We understand, after meeting with city leadership yesterday, that over the weekend, the 53rd Street underpass was flooded.
yes, again.
Was that our friendly beaver?
It is Beaver. And actually, so the road crew went in and removed portion of the dam, but they're back. And so we are working actively again with the road crew and with Shay. She's kind of our beaver expert. And we're going to be a little more aggressive with taking out the dam this time. Really, we just need to get to some dry weather, and we think we can kind of move them like along or encourage them to move along. We are also working with Kathleen Wesley with, the Watershed Council. And so those beaver bafflers right now that are underwater that are already installed they're completely underwater, so they're ineffective. And so we're going out there and kind of doing, actually, I think it's gonna be later this month, a little site tour to try to figure out, hey, what do we need to do to really make these work, whether that's pulling them out and reinstalling them. So there's more information to come, but yes, it's been slightly frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure mostly for the people who drive through there.
Exactly.
So,
That's
yes.
what we've heard. I saw
Yes.
the signs yesterday and I was like, it hasn't even rained.
Yeah, I know. No, it's our busy little beavers. So, yeah. Mhm.
That maybe we need to just put up a sign saying beavers at work.
Yeah, we could. Yeah.
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 Oh, thank you.
So, yeah, we're working on it. I can probably email you and let you know
That'd be
what
great.
yeah, absolutely.
If you go out and see beavers, will you take a picture and send it to us?
Yeah, so Shay was setting up game cams, so
Oh,
if
nice.
she,
Okay.
if she can do that and then we can see them
Awesome.
working, that'd be fun.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah.
They're so elusive. It's hard to see them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Maura, you're up next. Do you want a break?
Yes, please.
Okay, Maura, we're taking a 5-minute break.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. Call us back at 10:27 a.m. And we will continue with Maura Kwiatkowski for item 3.3.
I was gonna actually lead it off, if that's okay. Sure. I'm listed as well. So we're talking about streamlining the Board of Commissioner meeting minutes that we've had some discussions on. Presently, for us to provide word for word stenographer work, the Board of Commissioners has 4 individuals who are spending an extraordinary amount of time and well beyond. That's 4 full employees for the county. And not one of them is a trained stenographer. It's been a learned skill. So they've been doing an incredible time doing this. And Maura's going to give a small presentation. This has been brought up a few years ago. But we have done some research and we believe it's above and beyond following the state statute for public meetings. So we are also have made tremendous innovations in transparency with our Board of Commissioner meetings. We now obviously video and use closed captioning, and as well as we archive all of our meetings on a social media platform of YouTube. We pay for that subscription. We also archive all our social media platforms as a standard practice. We want to move forward and expand transparency, for example, adding comments in the public record, which would be something reasonable and would give folks a lot more to work with. So beyond that, Maura has been with the Board of Commissioners under 2 different county administrators. She manages the 4 individuals that do this type of work. And from that, I think you put together a PowerPoint, correct?
Yes, I did, Rachel. You know, I was, in the interest of time, I was planning to not go through that slide by slide, unless the commissioners would like me to do so. It's very similar to what you've all seen in August of 2022. There were just some additional points and some other information I wanted to share, but I will defer to the board's preference.
I would prefer, and just for anyone following along online or is going to watch this later, I think it'd be good for them to be able to see it. Yeah.
Okay, Amanda, would you mind bringing that presentation up?
You all see this? Yep. Not screen sharing though, online. You're screen sharing, but that's not shared online. I see your files.
That's what I see.
All right, little technical issue here. Sorry about this, folks. That's okay. All I see now is just all of our names. The blocks.
Amanda, would you like me to try?
Yes, please, Laura. I apologize.
Or I'm gonna make you a host. Now you have hosts there.
Can everyone see that now?
Yes.
Okay. So just a quick overview of what our goals are relative to, sharing the, the meetings and the business that the board does. And really it's about presenting them and completing them and presenting them in a timely manner, for the board and for, the general public, and ensuring that we're complying with statutes. This is a lot of words out of the statute. The things that are highlighted in blue are the minimum standards for what the statute requires, and that includes attendance, any kind of action taken by the board, the results of the vote, and substance of any discussion, and then as well as any document that's discussed, which would be, things that are in the packet and any exhibits that come in. So this is the minimum standard for what the statute requires that the minutes contain. And I think Vance will confirm that we are well in compliance with the minimums for statute. This is more information that comes from the Attorney General's office, that gives what they call guidance for when meeting minutes should be available. And they cite up to 3 weeks as sort of a minimum standard. And at this point right now, in terms of formal board meeting minutes, we are below that standard. These are the barriers the primary barriers that we consistently face in terms of trying to be timely, is that it is tremendously labor intensive to produce the level of detail that we're producing. And we've got a limited number of staff resources to accomplish this. This is this slide talks about the various levels of investment in the time. So it's basically 3 hours of post-meeting activity at a minimum for every 1 hour of meeting. And that's just to produce the minutes. I believe that the streamlined process would reduce our staff resource investment up to 2/3. We went out and took a look at what the various jurisdictions are doing in our area. And as you can see, our low area cities tend to lean more toward the detailed narrative style of minutes, which is what we're doing right now. And of course, the counties are either at a moderate narrative or to some kind of a summary, with the exception of Multnomah, and they actually use a court reporter style person that creates and publishes a verbatim transcript of the meeting, and that's their minutes document. So in general, the counties tend to lean toward a little bit more brevity than you would see in the cities, with the exception of Philomath, which uses a bullet point style. The proposal to streamline, it meets the minimum statutory requirements here, but under substance of discussions, that's where a summary would come in, and rather than the back and forth comment type style, it would be more a summary. The board, discussed a particular topic, some concerns expressed included, X and Y. And then if there is a vote, if it's an action item. So the packet included a 2-page example of what our current narrative style looks like versus what a summary style would look like. And you can see there's a considerable reduction in the amount of reporting that's taking place there. While I still believe it provides a solid report on the discussion that occurred. So here's some other things, you know, that if you take a look at our website, and I can do a screen share on the website, I have it up, but the website, you know, we now very quickly, we've got the agenda published, we've got the meeting packet published, but also within 24 hours, Erica is producing a meeting summary, which is a record of all the votes with the motions that were passed and what the voting result and action taken were. So within 24 hours, we are able to share with the general public basically the substance of the meeting. Also within that 24-hour period, we are posting we are embedding a link to the audio and embedding a link to the video on our website page. So the information there within 24 hours at this point is pretty comprehensive, save for the meeting minutes, which are taking considerably longer. This is a disclaimer, if you will, or if a clarification that was prepared by County Council when we originally brought this proposal to the board 2 years ago, that would clarify that the audio and video files are not part of the permanent record, and basically they're for convenience and reference. I've left blanks for the years because that would be a board decision about what you all feel is the most reasonable archive availability in terms of timing. So that's why you see blanks there. I'm not making a specific recommendation there. This would be my proposed schedule under the streamlined version of meeting minutes. Where the minutes would be, as you can see, they would be really brought to the next meeting. And down here, once the minutes are approved with the hyperlinks and with information about where in the recordings to find that particular topic would be posted. So this would then offer the public a complete picture of an entire meeting with all the tools and transparency resources we have available, you know, within 2 or 3 weeks at the very most. And right now I can tell you we're running, I'm sure you all know, 2.5 months behind on the approved meeting minutes. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Well, I'm going to stop sharing, but I would like to show you what the website looks like and just give you a quick look at the meeting summary. So can you all see the June 4th board meeting?
Yes.
Okay. So there, you know, we definitely have some opportunities to kind of clean this up and streamline it a little bit. But this is what the meeting from June 4th currently looks like. We have the agenda, we have a meeting packet, we have a meeting summary. We have a link embedded for the YouTube video, and we have a link for the audio. We also have a signed copy of the proclamation for Pride Month. And of course, then the final missing component to this would be the meeting minutes when they're approved. So that, you know, we really are building toward a comprehensive picture for the public of what's happened in the meeting and all the tools that are available for them to engage in that meeting. I'm going to stop sharing again. So, you know, just a couple remarks that I'd like to share with you all as you take this under consideration is that, you know, there really are 2 components, I believe, to transparency. And one of them is sharing as much information as possible. But the problem with the meeting minutes in terms of sharing them at a detailed level is that it takes much longer to produce with significantly more resources, and the relevancy then declines over time for the public in terms of that information. less detailed minutes provided a faster turnaround. The information is available when it's most relevant. And we do have significant other resources available for the public to get the detail, through audio, through video. And the other thing is, I believe there is just tremendous opportunity in our governance program to do many things and to do them better. As you all know, the boards, commissions, and committees program will move to the board staff on July 1st. I see tremendous opportunity there for the bylaws review, code of conduct, and some of these other components that the board has expressed a desire to have. Opportunity for a robust volunteer recognition program. So I just think that there's a considerable opportunity there. We're also implementing Civic Plus, the board platform, which is going to streamline our processes and I believe improve our quality considerably. I'd also would just really have a goal of creating a governance training program for our staff so that when new people come on, we can walk them through what governance means and how you engage with the board and how you present information to the board. And so those are some kind of what I would call big rocks things that I really look forward to our team being able to take on. Unfortunately, the minutes as they're required right now they're a tremendous drag, and it's mentally draining on staff to complete this process. I really believe that with all the tools we now have available and with making them available quickly to the public, we're getting them tremendous amount of information in a very short time frame, saved for the meeting minutes. So, it really, I guess comes down to where you all as commissioners want to direct the staff resources available to you as a board. So with that, I will stop talking and answer any questions or hear any of your comments.
Well, thank you, Maura, for that presentation. I am supportive of shifting to a modified form of minutes. I do believe, I agree that staff time can be deployed much more effectively and to greater purpose by shifting away from focusing on the verbatim minutes to other projects. I do have a question, however. Can we retain the audio and video as a permanent record, or what would that entail?
Well, I can certainly chime in. We can also archive it on our IT, and they're working on a solution for that. And presently, we have a contract with YouTube that allows kind of forever permanent archival services. So as long as that platform exists, that video would also be available to the public. And again, I want to emphasize with closed captioning. So it allows folks to look at an agenda and actually kind of, I'm aging myself, fast forward, like when we had tapes, to exactly where we need to capture the meeting that folks who may want to look at back, so they don't have to go through an entire 2-3 hour board meeting to look for what they're looking for. So
yeah, I really like the fact that in the example that you put together, you have the fact that those YouTube and SoundCloud are time-stamped to actually go to those agenda items. That makes it much more useful for anyone outside actually wanting to go directly to the discussion.
I'm supportive of being more efficient. I mean, it's pretty obvious if you're spending a lot of time on working through our board meeting minutes that you're not, staff isn't able to do something else. It doesn't It's just not very efficient. I like that we could have a quicker turnaround time to getting the minutes available. And these days, I think people like summaries, waiting through many pages. You've got one specific item that you're interested in. I think this has some advantages. And if you want to go through the whole 3-hour meeting, it's available. I'm not sure why anybody would want to do that, but so I appreciate the effort that has gone into getting this information and giving us a good picture of current situation and where we could be headed.
Well, so I feel pretty strongly about keeping the detailed minutes. But before I go into all my reasons why, I think one consideration that we should think about is the fact that we will have a new incoming commissioner in January. And, currently the Democratic nominee does not have a Republican candidate. It's very likely that he will be the next commissioner. Of course, I can't speak for him. I have not talked to him, but I do know that he has been a minutes taker for the city of Corvallis, the city of Newport, and he's currently the deputy city clerk for the city of Albany. So I just wonder if he might support more detailed minutes, and would it be worth, if we make and implement this change now and then have a new commissioner come in that wants to change it back? That just seems like a lot of back and forth. So I wonder if we might want to wait until we have a new commissioner before we make this decision.
I would say that I understand the rationale, but it doesn't change the fact that we have 4 staff people that are spending a large amount of their time on board minutes. And it is a really not very productive use of their time when we have a lot of other projects that we need to undertake, including the software adoption conversion in order to have a better platform for all of our processes. And as we're taking on the boards and advisory committees support role, I think that our minutes are going to be even later. And I don't see that the verbatim minutes provide that much more information than the summarized minutes, especially given the fact that we have both video and audio available. And we can put that timestamp link into every set of minutes.
Okay, so I will kind of go through some of the reasons that I'm thinking of then. And first of all, I want to say, actually, Maura, could you please screen share again? And could you go to, I think it's slide 2 that lists our goals or our goal?
Sure, just 1 second.
Sure. So while you're doing that, I will say that I really appreciate all of the work that went into this. I appreciate the sentiment. I do like the idea of having the links and the attachments. That's great. I think the website looks wonderful. I think that's a great place that people can go to. It's pretty intuitive. So all of that makes me really happy. So thank you. So our goals: minutes of the board meetings are completed and presented to the board for approval in a timely manner. Minutes of the board meetings are made easily accessible to the public in a timely manner. Timely completion and approval ensures Benton County complies with applicable statutes and governs with transparency. I completely agree with all of that. I think that's great goals to have. And more, if you could please go to slide 6, I think it's resources investment. So I acknowledge that, as it says in this PowerPoint, that producing detailed minutes is time consuming and it is an investment of our resources. I would say, yes, it is an investment. It does take hours now to complete the detailed minutes, but that's an investment in our future. Those hours now can save us countless hours of time later. Community members want to know, and I think they have the right to know why their elected officials made the decisions they did. Having the video or audio recording is great, and I support having the recordings. I just don't think it's a substitute. And it can be time consuming to find the right portion of a recording. Could you please go to the regional jurisdictions approach slide? Thank you. So when looking at the list of the cities and counties, I think it's worth noting that Corvallis and Albany both have the detailed narratives, meaning that the majority of Benton County residents, Corvallis and North Albany, are used to seeing detailed minutes. And those two populations represent about 72,000 of our 95,000 people in Benton County. And yes, Adair Village and Philomath have brief minutes. Adair Village has a population of about 1,000 people, and they have 5 or 6 employees. Philomath has a population of about 5,400 and 30 employees or less. And again, Benton County has a population of 95,000, and we employ 500, 600 people. It's a lot more. We're a lot bigger. In addition, there have been several instances of us, the county, wondering why we made a decision in the past, or even trying to find evidence of a decision we thought we made. One example that comes to mind is when the Budget Committee determined the salary for a second-term commissioner, but the minutes were streamlined and the meeting was not recorded by either video or audio. And when Commissioner Ogerow was elected to her second term, she waited weeks for her new salary to start. It was a rather complicated process to make it right. The Budget Committee members had to be convened again, and this time with a different makeup of members. In addition, we make big decisions. We make big decisions about public health, about the jail, the landfill, and more. We got criticized with JSIP. Many people said we were not transparent enough with the process and not forthcoming with all of the details on the bond. I think that we meant it when we said that we wanted to build trust back after the bond failed, and I know I meant it. Therefore, I think it's important to take even the small things like this very seriously. I do not want to lose any more trust. Other examples, we got accused of slashing the CHC budget. We've been criticized about decisions about the landfill, accused of hiding information and not being forthcoming with public records requests. And not every decision feels big in the moment. An example, the landfill franchise agreement in December of 2020 didn't feel like a big decision at the time, but in hindsight, we know that it was. A few months ago, there was anger over our updated media policy. Many accused us of trying to be secretive and not transparent. What might be said about this new decision? That we're again trying to limit government transparency. I can almost hear people say, first they decided to limit communication with the press, and now they're cutting the meeting minutes. I imagine holding a public hearing for an appeal to the landfill expansion and imagine what the streamlined minutes would look like. There was a public hearing, staff presented, the applicant presented, people testified, this motion passed. That worries me. I don't think that's enough. I don't think that's enough for our community. Now I will ask you to think about it from an equity standpoint. Most people cannot attend our meetings during the day. They have work or school. Having minutes for them and everyone else who wants to read them is a service. It takes time to navigate recordings and it can be frustrating. We also know that broadband is an issue in many parts of Benton County. Those with poor internet connections have a much harder time downloading recordings than they do a short document. Our minutes are a service to our community. And our motto, by the way, is at your service every day. Every day, and with every decision we make, we have an opportunity to build trust or to lose trust. Every day we have the opportunity to truly serve our community. We talk a lot about the vision and core values, but as I've said in the past, I feel like we don't always talk about good governance enough. And good governance is the foundation that the rest of our work is built on. I see the detailed minutes as a core function of that good governance for the county. As I've stated, detailed minutes are a service to the community and a service to ourselves. Producing detailed minutes can help us prevent embarrassing incidents in the future. And it's not only a question of equity, but also of transparency and trust building. On the current state slide, under barriers to timely completion, I saw that it said detailed narrative style is time consuming. And the other bullet point was insufficient staff resources. So since I think we need to keep the detailed minutes, I think we should look at the insufficient staff resources portion. What do we need to do? What additional resources are needed? What work needs to be taken off staff's plate? That is the conversation I would like to have. What are the alternatives to streamlining the minutes? Thank you.
I think that couching this as a matter of trust and transparency is only partly realistic. The example that we've seen, the moderated or the somewhat condensed minutes doesn't eliminate any of the actual decision-making and the rationale for decision-making. What it did remove was some of the back and forth in terms of questions that commissioners asked at that verbatim component. I think that that is pertinent when we really want to dive deep into knowing why a decision was made, but we have the recordings for that purpose. I don't think, and anyone else can also go to those recordings. They're time-stamped. So it's not going to take a long time to find that particular portion of the video or audio recording. It would just be a click away. I think that is, so it's less of a concern to me. I agree, we've made errors in the past. Part of it has been for lack of searchability. Even with those massive archives of minutes that we have, the very verbatim minutes, we had ineffective means to actually go back and search to find the things that we were looking for. I think that we have the technology now to be able to search and to be able to find minutes that are appropriate. Sometimes we also have to know that it was an issue. And sometimes we don't know that. But we are in a better position now than we have been in the past to be able to look back at documented decisions. So I don't like the couching it purely in a matter of trust and as a matter of trust and transparency. I think what Maura has focused on is good governance overall and the whole sweep of things that the Board of Commissioners staff provides in terms of support for good governance. It's not just about minutes. Minutes is just one vehicle, one tool, but that's my perspective on the matter. And I want to be judicious of staff time. There are a lot of things that can be done with that staff time other than focusing on verbatim minutes.
Sure, and I think I would just note our minutes are not verbatim. It is a summary, but I take your point. And I am thinking of the optics. So I know all the reasons why staff wants this and why it's a good idea from that perspective. You know, I don't want staff to be unhappy. I don't want them to do countless hours of work that is a drag and, you know, that's not fun. But I'm thinking about it. I know you don't want to have it just couched as transparency, but I'm thinking we don't have a say over how the public couches it, how they see it from their point of view. And I just feel like now is not the time to erode. If there's anything that we do, if that leads to eroding more trust, even though that's not our intention, I would like to avoid doing that. And I do think that this is important. I know, Rachel, you said that we were already going above and beyond, which I think that's good. On my whiteboard, I have a quote that says, hold yourself to the highest standards because you are the standard. And I don't think it's a bad thing that Benton County sets the standard. So I've said my part. That's my opinion.
Well, a couple of things. As far as delay, this has been in the works, or say since August of 22. I think we've delayed long enough. The other part, I mean, this isn't a permanent, this can be modified, proposal can be modified as needed. But I think a lot of your examples were in the past where there wasn't as good of alternatives as they are now. And I think part of our job as commissioners is to make the best decision and try our best to explain to the community why we made that. But I think this is a good proposal, and I think we should implement it. I think it's not more precious than time and allocate that to different projects. I think is important, and I think we keep asking staff to do more. And at some point, you have to figure out, well, how can we rearrange things so the workload is reasonable.
Sure, and so I'll mention too that in our discussion in August 2022, I requested more information on other alternatives. And I specifically requested information on contracted minute takers, because a lot of other jurisdictions use contracted minute takers, and I'm not sure why, if there's really good reasons why we don't or can't, I would like to see that. But so to me, I would have liked to see some other, I'm not convinced yet that this is the only thing to do, the only way. I feel like there could be other alternatives, and I feel like it's fair, it would be fair to look into the other alternatives before we make a decision. And I just, you know, it feels to me a little bit like, oh, I could do the dishes a lot faster if I just rinsed them instead of actually washing them. Again, I just feel like, this is my opinion, I feel like it's worth doing right. And we might have different opinions of what's right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think that since I've been here, this has been a problem. It's not as much of a problem now. We're doing much better, but we're falling behind again. When I first got here, there were minutes that were 3 years in arrears. I had to sign off on minutes where no one was left on the board any longer. And that is just not right. That's not transparency. Timeliness is a key component for transparency. And when you look at the statute, timeliness figures largely. I believe, it's my recollection, and I don't know, Vance, if you have a memory of this, that when we first hired Erica, we did contemplate contracting it out. And I think we put out a request for proposals. And my recollection is that we didn't get the caliber of bid that we were looking for. It was not an easy process. So we converted it to a staff position at that time, a part-time staff position. And so I don't know that contract note-taking is necessarily the solution, although that environment has changed and that might change.
Yeah.
That said, I again will repeat that I don't think there's a huge loss in the level of information between the current level of detailed minutes and the moderate narrative that we are proposing to put together. And if you look at all the other counties, there's only one county that is providing actual verbatim transcript, and all the others are less detailed. We have more meetings per year than cities do. We have 20 meetings more per year than the city of Corvallis or the city of Albany. It's an intense time investment. So I made my position clear.
Sure. And I
don't know, yeah.
That process where you looked at minute takers before was 6 or 7 years ago, sounds like. It was before my time, and things have changed. It's a lot more people want to work from home. They want to have flexible gigs. They can watch the meetings virtually. I would like to look into that. I think that it's something worth looking into. And if it turns out to not be a good idea, then fine. But I would just prefer to evaluate other options before just going with this one. And I know I don't know, Corvallis and Albany don't seem to have a lot of problems with this that I've noticed, and maybe it's because we have more meetings. I don't know, but I would also like to know why don't they have what are they doing? What are they doing?
Well, first of all, I think it's a whole different set of government to look at. City government is very different than county government. We have 3 commissioners. There isn't a lot of debate in our meetings where I think legislators do have spirited debates on the floor, which require, more of that public record. It is to note that the state legislature does not also use stenographers. And I did just pull up a report in the state's current workforce that stenographers is one of the top hard to find individuals to do that work. It's again, holding the same standard of really looking at, we can try to look at tracking some analytics on how many people actually go to the minutes, the word for word minutes, who's downloading it, who's reading it, and try to see the need with that.
The thing is, the need can change because these are minutes forever into the future. And so we don't know when something is going to be critical for a work group that we have in 10 years or 20 years or community members to go back and look at. So even though maybe not very many people are looking at it now,
Yeah.
we don't know how important it's going to be in the future.
And hopefully with archival video and closed captioning, AI will soon be here and then, and then they can get a word for word transcription from closed captioning as well as the video, which.
That sounds great, but I hear hopeful, which is not, I don't have that assurance now. So.
Maura?
Thank you, Commissioner Ogerow. I just did want to share that back in August of 2022, when we presented this, we did do some considerable outreach to the Recorders Association and got a list of transcriptionist members from them. We reached out to, I would say, 15 or 20 of them, trying to find someone who would be interested in this type of work. And we weren't successful at that time. I do know that the city of Corvallis actually contracts with people. They advertise on Craigslist and Facebook and places like that to find, retirees or students or people who are interested in doing that. I've leaned away from that type of approach just because then that becomes a management function, and we have to manage making sure we always have coverage, and it's our meetings occur during the workday. But again, we did outreach to a considerable number of actual recorder members, and we're not getting any interest either from the verbatim transcript model or from a detailed narrative type model. And again, that was 2 years ago. So, but the climate may have changed, but we did do that originally in August of 2022.
Thank you, Maura. I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. That makes me feel better that I was listened to and you guys looked into it. I very much appreciate that. So I guess, I've said my bit. The last thing I will say is when I ran for commissioner 4 years ago, I carry around one of my postcards with me. One of my core goals was improve public records access and transparency. So this is why I'm doing this. This is what I believe in. I am advocating for what I think is right.
And I've done that.
Please don't interrupt me. I'm advocating for what is right, and I've said my piece. The end.
Do you want to make a motion?
Yes. I move to approve the transition to a straight line minutes format for Board of Commissioners meetings.
I'll second that. All in favor, signify with an eye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
No.
Thank you. Moving on. Thank you, Maura.
Well, Maura's actually going to talk about the summer meeting schedule. Do we have everybody have a copy of the proposed summer meeting schedule?
Wait, actually, it only the first of July.
I can put it up on the screen, if that's helpful. So during one of our agenda setting meetings recently, there was some discussion about potentially modifying the board meeting schedule over the summer to accommodate board vacation plans, as well as those of a number of our department directors. is the time of year when people do try to get away with their families. We looked, July makes the most sense in terms of a proposed condensed meeting schedule. And so the table that you have in front of you are the recommendations that we developed in terms of condensing the schedule and maybe canceling some meetings. So this is just some suggestions for your consideration and decision-making about how you'd like to proceed with meetings in the month of July.
So the main changes would be to cancel the leadership team meeting, which occurs on the 3rd of July. Because there are many department heads that are out of town, and it's a crunch week because of the holiday. To reschedule our internal departments twice yearly meeting with the Board of Commissioners to the week of July 8th, and to cancel our quarterly information sharing meeting on the 4th Tuesday of the month, given that it's a peak vacation time, and I know that Commissioner Wise is out that week, potentially. So that would free up that week, and to reschedule county council's meeting that week, so that there would be no board meetings that last week of July.
Would actually be the last 2 weeks, there would be no meetings for, well, except, well, the Justice and Law Enforcement on the 18th. So after the 18th, there would be none for the rest of the month.
Thoughts? It's up to us as commissioners. The leadership team meeting, Rachel was already canceled. But that is primarily her meeting, so prerogative to do so. But the other meetings are ours.
I think it makes sense. I appreciate staff kind of coordinating calendars and making sense out of them. So I think the proposed changes look like a good idea.
Yeah, I don't have any issues with that.
Okay. I don't know whether this needs a vote or whether we could just say we.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. And I really do appreciate the staff time that went into looking into everyone's schedules to put together some alternatives. And thank you for doing that. And thank you. I'm expecting it will probably be Mariah that will work to reschedule a couple of those meetings along with Vance and Teresa. So thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Maura. Next up is the Sustainable Materials Management Plan update with Bailey and Sean and Rick.
Commissioners wrote. So have Bailey and Sean here to join me, but thanks for the opportunity to give you a quick update on where things stand with the SMMP. And as you know, as you all know, there's certainly been some pivots here recently in relation to our plan around the SMMP and moving forward. I think everyone obviously is aware that Steve Chase, the task force chair, the assigned task force chair, has stepped down in that role. I guess what I'm planning to do here, and we'll kind of invite both Sean and Bailey to weigh in, but I'd just like to kind of give you sort of step-by-step update on here's the things that we're moving forward on. So first of all, I think with all things, it's this is a major undertaking, a big plan, an important plan as we move forward, and we want to do it well, do it right. And so it's an opportunity for us to take just a quick step back, reset for a moment, and make sure that everything is aligned. So that's for us the first and foremost on what we want to do. The second thing from an organizational standpoint on how we're going to deal with this initiative going forward, this will be a Board of Commissioners office sponsored initiative run out of the Board of Commissioners office. I guess you could look at me as sort of your project sponsor, if you will, and Sean, who is our Board of Commissioners staff, will be our project manager. But Bailey, who I like to call a resident subject matter expert here in Benton County, certainly will be part of our team working forward. You can consider your project team, if you will, moving this forward. I can see Bailey obviously being a huge participant as a county representative going forward with SMMP along with other regional partners. I also want to recognize that Lindsay Goodman, who's my assistant, also will be helping to support administratively any kind of task force that is, or the task force that is established and the organization around that. Wanted to first let you know that's how we are approaching this. Again, very collaboratively. All three of us are meeting weekly to make sure that we're having project check-ins and that we're staying on track. The next thing is the contract. So as you all know, that there was a contract to be put in place. I think the best way to describe the purpose of that contract was really to, at least initially, create information that's important information for us as we go forward with any kind of task force, any kind of plan on, again, what are the resources? What are the best practices? What are the things that need to be considered in any kind of plan? That contract was not finalized. I know it was approved back in March by the board, but it had not been finalized. And so we've been working with RSS, which is our contractor on that. We do have a final draft that we had gone back and forth with them. They had initially done the draft themselves. We spent a lot of time, the three of us, going through that and making sure that it was hitting our needs. And I'm happy to say we have a kind of a final draft we're looking at, but it's just a matter of execution. But let me outline for you kind of the three main objectives as I see it. First and foremost is what is defined as facility status emerging opportunities. So we need to know where are the opportunities out there across Western Oregon, in obviously Benton County, but across the region, on where are there opportunities where we could be doing alternative, taking advantage of the sustainable, as opposed to putting them to landfill or to be able to divert them to alternative sources. We need to know where those are located. So that's an undertaking that we're asking our contractor to do. We need what I often call cost benefit, but analysis of benefit and consequences. So what are the benefits of all these various things? How do we understand what we're actually, getting in terms of return in relation to using these alternative emerging opportunities. And then the word, of course, I always like is innovation, because there are so many different things that can be done today, as opposed to just throwing it away. But how do we turn to become more proactive and look at these ideas from an innovative? So look at this contract, at least initially, with the dollars, because we're not using all the $400,000 that was dedicated all at once. We're using this first investment to really compile the information that we can use to move us forward with the task force and being able to pull together what would be a regional plan. The next piece that I guess I want to highlight is, being able to fine tune the purpose. I think it's clear to me, and I think I can speak for Bailey and for Sean that, and I, can speak for Steve Chase as well. And our discussions with him prior to his departure is that, depending on who you ask, there's a different version of exactly what the purpose of this is. And I know that we have designed what was called a prospectus, and we're trying to look at that and make that a little bit clearer in terms of really what the purpose of this work is. And Sean had done some preliminary work, I believe, back in February or March, and we're trying to build off of that. But the point is that I want to be able to sit down to all three commissioners and say, here's clearly we can all, as I like to say, sing to the same sheet of music and exactly what that purpose is. But also, as this socializing this amongst all of the other potential task force members, we want to be really, really clear so they understand what this is all about. And that is kind of, we were in the phase of, I know you all have been provided a list of individuals that were potential members. I think it was somewhere around 40. We were also told that it could be anywhere between 40 and 70 in terms of a task force. I think we really want to, one, getting back to this final fine tuning, is be able to go back to those that have been contacted and make sure we understand the message that was provided to them, and then be able to use this information to say, okay, this is what we're trying to get to, and be able to get everybody on the same page. Not everybody on those 40 had been contacted. I also think, as we think about some form of task force to help us with a regional plan, having a lot of people, a lot of voices is good, but you also want a manageable task force as well that's going to, help us get through to an end product. So with the task force itself, though, again, I think something that we're working on, and that Sean and Bailey have already started, and they're going to be primarily looking, at least initially, I think, talking to Marion Polk. We're going to be talking to a lot of people, but really working with them to make sure that there is clear understanding and what has been communicated at this point. But I think something it's going to be critical for us, and in some of the conversations that we've had to date, is DEQ. And I think it's clear to me, in talking to AOC representation and also talking to DEQ directly, that they're a little confused, I guess is the best way to say, and exactly what the county is doing. I think they've also wondered, looking at it, is some of that their role, and how do they get involved into it? Regardless, I think there are conversations that need to really be facilitated with DEQ to make sure that there's joint understanding. I don't think that there's any one saying that you shouldn't do something like this, but I think that this work has sort of taken, there's discussion of a plan, which I think everybody sees coming out of this, but there's also been a discussion of this task force being a statewide table, being a legislative concept that would go forward. And my sense is that has been, I'm not saying both are important, but that maybe has trumped a little bit of the idea of the regional plan, and both are equally important. I think it's safe to say that if the idea that having a statewide policy task force or committee to really help shape public policy around sustainable materials, if that is something that we want to push for, it likely, in my experience, often needs to come from a state agency, because a state agency can often be the biggest barrier to you getting a concept through. So that gets back to the conversation with DEQ. If there is going to be any kind of statewide task force, they're the one that's going to end up managing it, and they're the one that's going to end up paying for it. So I think it's important, if that is something we move towards, we need their partnership. And so that's, again, kind of two tracks here, but for us, and I guess I would ask for your thoughts on this as well, but getting to the plan, building the task force to really focus on the plan and what we regionally can do. And this is not just a Benton County thing. This is a regional approach. But what can we begin to do to change and to be able to create those sustainable materials opportunities that exist? Bailey's been great in terms of educating me, and some of the things that he said in terms of, what's going into the landfill. I'm sure in multiple landfills, but into our landfill, there's opportunities. Much of that can be either recycled, or you can find alternatives to that. We just have to now begin to figure out, how do we move that dial? How do we create that action plan? So that is, the work that we see, we are still aiming, as we discussed, have moving a idea of called a kickoff or a initial meeting of the task force. We're still aiming for after Labor Day. We wanted to get in alignment with the contract though, because we need that information to be able to have a successful meeting. And based on what the contractor told us in our last meeting, it's a push, but we think we would have draft product, particularly around the facility status and emerging opportunities by, I think he said probably about mid to the end of September, final maybe the first part of October. But that's, I think, and again, trying to channel Steve from the discussions we'd had with him preliminary, he too thought that really would be critical to have that piece of information, to have good conversation with the task force. Take a quick breath and see, and ask my colleagues here, did I miss anything you would like to maybe share with the group?
That was nice, succinct, and where we are.
Guess I would just ask the commissioners, is there anything, I guess, from your perspective that you heard me say that is concerning to you, that is maybe off track? Again, I want to be, I want to do kind of what, all of us be at the same place, and our focus really, and our discussion is how do we get into that? We believe a regional group, a regional task force, and a real focused effort on a regional plan that is, can help us move the dial. And when I think of plans, I know sometimes people think, okay, you put that on the shelf. I mean, I'm talking about actionable plan that you can actually measure. You're making a difference. And those are the type of things that we think, we want to be able to focus most on. The legislative piece, I'm not saying it isn't important. I think that the presentations to you in the past had suggested maybe a legislative concept in the fall. Maybe, but again, I think a conversation with DEQ, if again, trying to create some kind of statewide body, and those things can be effective if managed well. But I think that could be a different track, and I think we should also be using our legislative contractor on how we can position ourselves as well on those type of things. And I also believe we got to kind of, have a legislative champion that's going to carry that. So yeah, I'd invite any input from you all on, what we need, what I'm not thinking about, if there is a different course section. The last thing I should say, and Sean's going to be great with this, is that I think you all want to see a clear project plan. And that's one of the things that we want to make sure that we have really clear targets. So we're going to do this by such and such dates. That helps us stay on track as we move forward.
And thank you. I strongly agree with the fact that the regional plan is primary, that we need to focus on, again, what the right region is, and have those players at the table. And it's a little tricky with that first project, that facilities analysis, because that will inform us a little bit about who needs to be at the table.
Yeah.
But I think we can put the group together, and if we need to add someone,
leave it open.
But I also agree that legislative elements are secondary, and that they will emerge through the process, and we don't know what they are now. And frankly, in order to get in the long session, you have to have that concept already in action and recruiting supporters and allies now. So I appreciate the step back and the slowing down to get it right. And I'm really looking forward to seeing a project plan. And when might that be available?
We're putting together the materials right now. I think we had made your first meeting in July to have something to chew on and get your feedback on.
Yeah. Goal setting was what I was aiming for these kind of discussions. So that's what Sean and I had talked about. We'll recalibrate if necessary, in our check-in meeting. But yeah, that's what we had aimed for. Yeah.
Are there further questions, clarifications?
it's a regional facility that needs a regional plan. I'm not quite sure where the legislative aspect and turning a large project into a huge project at this point, I don't think makes any sense. We've got a lot of work to do to figure out who our partners are and give them some idea of what our goals are and timetable and that sort of thing. I was thrilled when I saw the list and saw some of the names on there, and now it's, I think, been long enough contacting everybody and letting them know where we're headed and are you still wanting to be a partner with us. So I think that's the first step, and with that, getting some notion of momentum. We're rolling, early days. Are you with us? You know, do you have a little bit of time, or want to go all in on your participation? I can see some of those people on the list being consultants or somebody who ask specific questions and that they can maybe dip in and out versus being on a regular schedule and being full participants. I think Steve Kramer, Wasco County Commissioner, whose term ends at the beginning of next year, and he's not running again, but has a really deep background and interest involved. Mentioned that now he has all kinds of time to do work like this. This sounds good, but getting a regional group together, I think, is a big enough challenge. And you talk about legislation or opening up to statewide effort. We're not ready for that. I mean, and I can see a large project, if the goals are even wider, going on for years. So, and Commissioner Ogerow mentioned we're not anywhere close to, as far as I know, ready for legislation. So, 25 session ship is sailed.
I think Commissioner Ogerow said it well, in that, you know, a lot of actually the work that you do, and when you start identifying barriers and challenges, sometimes it's statewide policy that you have to influence and change. I think we all get that and understand it, but you got to first identify it. And where are those barriers? What are the things that we've done to try to work around that? And if at some point get to a roadblock and say, okay, you know, we got to change this. And that's where I think that the legislative opportunities exist. You know, I think the thought is always, if you have a statewide type committee, they might be more influential to be able to do that. I don't disagree with that, but you know, you got to start these things. You got to initially seed it and then be able to grow it. The other thing, just in response to, just to alleviate any concerns, that has been the priority for both Sean and Bailey to jump on, in terms of those contacts that you mentioned, to make sure that we're keeping and making sure there's still understanding we're moving forward, helping us to gain clarity, but that is the priorities to work on that. I think as we move into establishing a task force, part of me also thinks about, when you look at, okay, is your regional plan, your outcome that you're looking for, who are the people, what is the expertise that you want? So I always say you need a lot of Baileys, you need a lot of subject matter experts, right? You need to duplicate him across this region and get those folks all around That's one important. You need innovators. You know, you mentioned consultants. I mean, where are those innovative businesses that are doing some of these things around sustainable materials? We need to hear about those. You also need, people that have political will and champions. And so you need those commissioners, you need those city officials, you need those legislative members. So they're all important, but I think finding that right mix to make sure that our end product is getting here, who are the right seats to fill. And so sometimes I know we go to, well, we have this person, this person, this person. That's great, but do they have the expertise that you want at the table to be able to help shape your plan, inform your plan? And so that's what we really want to be just thoughtful about.
Sure. Well, I will add my support, and I appreciate, hearing the words about actionable plan that you can measure. The previous iteration of this was feeling sort of nebulous to me. And it did seem like it was sort of, growing and getting bigger and what about this, and just trying to encompass so much, which is exciting. But I think this is very prudent to start with our regional plan, figure out what works for us. And then if we set up a successful model, there's nothing to say we can't get to the legislature sometime in the future after. That's right.
Well, and I'll modify my thoughts about the legislative approach. Especially once we have something going, I can see figuring out who in the legislature is interested and could be supportive of continuing this, maybe helping us with this project, or if need legislation, identify early on people that are interested and could help us move things forward.
Lastly, I'll just say kudos to these two guys here. They've been great to work with and help. And again, just looking forward for us to continue to work together as a project team. I think you'll be well supported and proud of the work that we deliver for you.
And I appreciate the update. I was pretty sure there were things going on that I hadn't heard too much about. This is timely, and I'll emphasize the word momentum. I mean, it's contacting people and some of which know about the project already and haven't heard anything in a while.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's a critical first step is, no, we're rolling, and we would like you to be involved and get some feedback on how involved they want to be.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I'm really glad we have a team.
Me too.
Okay, next up is Commissioner County Administrator.
You just promoted me again. So there's a lot going on. Hopefully before the next goal setting, I'll have some new leadership role updates for our commissioners, but it would be premature today. Some recent county activities of note is I attended with actually Commissioner Wise, the Scenic Byway Management Plan Steering Committee in Philomath. We did a lot of wrap-up meetings that you've all been a part of with UPD Consulting, which was our EDI consultant. We're talking in the future possibly of helping us to recruit to that position. I think that they bring in some subject matter expertise that might be able to help us find a good fit. I attended the Valley City Managers and County Administrators meeting. I also attended the CHC Board of Directors meeting. I attended the Public Works Barbecue with Commissioner Malone was there. I have my monthly check-in with city leadership with Mark Shepard. The quarterly BOC City Managers meeting, which all of you attend. I toured the Crystal Lake Cemetery with Jesse Ott on Memorial Day. So I learned all the wonderful things that many people don't know, that the county also manages a cemetery. So I have to just do a shout out. It's beautifully maintained. They had all flags out for veterans, and it's really a beautiful place. I also toured the Lincoln Health Center and attended a staff meeting with their team meeting. Really, really impressed, seeing the gamut from doctors to front desk receptionists, and the engagement between all of them of how they're trying to all work together. And let's just say medical records are really hard to find and define and keep. We also had the quarterly Benton County Corvallis Leadership Meeting. Some community engagement since our March goal setting meeting is, I also met with Helen Higgins from the Boys and Girls Club. She had some particular questions regarding the landfill. She's also a neighbor. We had the Owens Farm Open House on a rainy day. We met with Rebecca Robinson, who is also the Associate Vice President of Economic Development and Industry Relations at OSU. It's a brand new, sparking new position. Mainly she's working with CORMIC, CORMIC. And also she's really looking at the new technologies and trying to keep them within the region. She is based in Bend, Oregon, but it's also how it works with all of our universities. We're committed to kind of reporting up quarterly. If that's someone that you'd like to bring to a board meeting, we can certainly talk about that. She is brand new though, so I want to give her a little time to get her feet on the ground. Professional organizations continue to work with ICMA regarding credentialing program. I think I'm going to try to attend the National ICMA conference in September. Are you going to?
No, good for you.
Oh, yeah. It's all the way in Philly, and not Philly, Pittsburgh, but.
Bring me back a terrible towel, will you?
So that'll be fun and interesting. Professional, so then I just go down a little bit more and just some continuing work. Tracy Martineau and I are working on creating an engaging workplace. We're taking some classes together to try to, of course, continue to engage our workforce, which is ever changing. I'm also working, I'm working with Deanne Hammond, who works in public works with GIS. She's part of it. I'm kind of interested in how we track parks, but also how we can use this as a communication tool more with mapping. I think it's a great way for people in the spirit of transparency as well, is to really understand whether, we always pull out the map for our buildings in the county, but other ways that we can maybe layer in some of our projects. And I think people would find it cool on our website, as well as I think it's a good talking point for our BOC meetings for people to be able to look at them and kind of understand where the work is being done throughout the county. We're starting the chief financial officer search. We have a kickoff meeting on Friday. We are working with a recruiter on this specific position. So we're kind of looking forward to moving forward with that. Continue to have my NACA meetings. We have a Benton County LC work group meeting. I have a tour of the Monroe Health Center, which I'm really excited to get out to the health centers because they're a great group of people and they're doing work that is super important. And Commissioner Wise and I also do the HOPE Executive Committee meetings that are coming up. So I know I took some of your thunder because of the work that you guys do, because sometimes I'm there with you. So these are all just a little bit of an idea of where I am throughout the county and the work that we're working on. Any questions?
No questions. And then most of the programmatic updates and things you've given us in our one-on-one meetings, so
yeah,
those are all, but that's great.
Okay.
Who would like to go next?
I'll mention, yes, we went to the Mary's Peak, or the scenic byway, it's got a long name. Got myself on the executive committee, because I need one more, but like duty, right, like quarterly, and it's kind of fun, so.
It's a great group of people.
Yeah.
And does it include everyone from the I-5 all the way to the coast to Walport?
Yes, and then there's two spurs, like one to Mary's Peak and one down the BLM.
Oh, yeah,
by
the
Alcee
loop,
Falls.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and so trying to incorporate those things too.
Mhm.
Good, yeah. So that will be kind of ongoing. That's been a hard one, I guess, because it doesn't really live anywhere. So the city of Philomath is convening it, but it's not necessarily their job. So we're just all kind of trying to make it work.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some of the priorities were like signage, right?
Yeah, just so you know, because you get lost, sometimes you get lost and it wasn't, I've seen the signs to Mary's Peak and to Alcee, but I didn't realize they were spurs. So I'm like, oh, I thought it was supposed to be this, I don't know, better wayfinding.
ODOT had made big promises when they held their first community meetings about signage, about how they would support the scenic byway, but I think that COVID, their funding troubles both have put a dent in that. So bravo to Philomath for stepping up.
Yeah. Also went to the historic preservation celebration and got to present our historic courthouse advisory committee group members with a little token of appreciation from the county for their service. And actually, one thing I learned is I had no idea that they video documented all of the old bridge and taking it apart, and they're doing like coursework or some kind of modules with Oregon State University on it in the engineering. And then they are also going to be setting up an interpretive site, a little, outdoor center that's going to talk about the bridge. So having just come from that Mary's Peak Byway meeting, I thought, hey, wouldn't that be cool if we added that, if it's right over the bridge in downtown Corvallis?
Yeah.
That'd be a cool spot to add to that, area.
I was, if I want to tag you in on this one, because I had no idea after all of the very extensive public uproar about not saving the bridge, that there was an entire mitigation plan that was negotiated with ODOT. And that mitigation plan is an 8-point plan, and it specifies these two locations where there are going to be elements of the bridge with interpretive sites, and there's the key that steel piece of the bridge is at the Corvallis Museum. And then the curriculum piece was really interesting because they did an RFP, and this group out of Utah actually got it, and they with the Association of Steel Architects or whatever it was, I can't remember what the group is, putting together this curriculum using the Van Buren Bridge as a teaching tool. And they've put together all kinds of models, both digital and paper, and all of the videos. And so the Van Buren Bridge is going to be memorialized in this curriculum that'll be used by engineering schools all across the country, because it's going to be available for any professor anywhere to use, or even around the world. So that's one way to make a historic artifact last in a very different medium.
Yeah, pretty exciting.
Yeah, I thought that was fun.
Let's see, what else? I got to give a quick update about LOAC, the Local Officials Advisory Committee, to the AOC Governance, Revenue, and Economic Development Steering Committee meeting. So I think it's always good. Not all commissioners, hardly anybody knows what LOAC does, so it's just been good to try to get out there and spread, hey, this is important, come talk to us. Been working from home and my computer had issues, but I think I called in and I think I did okay. Pat, you might have been on there. I don't remember, but anyway, it worked out okay. I think, let's see, the art display opening at Alcee Library is coming up on Saturday, the 22nd. So I'm hoping to go to that. My calendar says it's at 2. I assume that's when it is.
I think it's 2 to 4.
2 to 4. Okay, that's what I have.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Let's see. Should have probably mentioned it when Bailey was here, but Friday, the 17th of May, did a solid waste tour, 3 stops. Started at the new MRF in Brooks that has 8 8 owners, Republic and I think 7 other haulers, invested 25 million to upgrade a very old facility into a pretty impressive operation. And 25 million, and they beat the inflation. And now that facility would cost 40 or 50 million, and we wouldn't be able to do it. So they had good timing. It's been in operation about 3 years. They're still fine tuning it. Things still get gummed up, and saw a guy in a harness get to go down a chute, and it was stopped. I mean, they stopped it and pull some junk out that had clog things up. So it's they try their best, but that's part of the operation. Downtime. Second stop was Bailey was still here. At the Brooks facility, Bailey was welcomed as a returning, well-liked person. He worked for Marion County, but had a lot of connection with these folks, and is very well liked, which is always nice to see. But, he left on very good terms. Second stop, Garton. That was a nonprofit, much smaller sorting. They have a little MRF and batteries, and trying to they hire disabled people in addition to other people, and their goal is, well, when you see people working, you can't tell them apart. But one of their main challenges is just the changes in the market for what they recycle. It's challenging because you can have a wonderful budget on paper, Rick, and then especially on the revenue side, they are just at the mercy of the markets, and fairly small operator, but have been in business a couple decades or more. Third stop was my favorite. It was a bike shop in Salem where refurbish bikes, give bikes to low-income people for transportation. And, I would assume it's a nonprofit and been in business a while, and fix bikes, sell bikes, give bikes away. Just a real resource for the community, and pretty good scale. I mean, so that was a good tour. Next day, something completely different. Benton County had the evacuation drill based out of Calapooya in a church somewhere in Corvallis, or practice evacuation modestly attended. It was also a voting day, so there was some, because they routed people through our parking lot and had to leave a lane for voting. We had a fair board meeting. I think things are settling down. Jesse Ott has been doing most of the work for quite a while, and now he has the title of interim director, I think, and is well received by staff and volunteers. Rachel, did you, I'm not gonna, have a meeting at Hewlett Packard?
I did.
Cormick. Bunch of stuff I don't understand, but Hewlett Packard had a couple machines there that looked a lot like inkjet printers, except they were doing
Microfluidics.
blood sample evaluations.
They seem to be kicking up more. They're hiring more lately, and
Yep.
they seem to be a little more active than they said previous years.
Yep, I mean, they had a long decline as far as number of employees, like a couple decades. And I think they're coming back in Corvallis, which is good for everybody.
I do believe they're also working on the semiconductor. They want to be in the business more. So, I mean, they're pretty active with the federal government of trying in the state to try to.
The CHIPS Act.
Yep.
CHIPS Act,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think they made it through the first round or first two round. They were expecting news on the next round, like a couple days later. And as usual, we don't hear anything about it.
Not yet.
I don't anyway. I mean, that's part of my request is just more information, OSU, HP, things going on. They were talking about estimating 5,000 to 10,000 new jobs in the next decade. Well, housing and, but I talked to a couple of people about that and said, well, some people moving out, some people moving in, that it won't have a dramatic impact, which is a good thing. Because the housing situation around here is tough now, but anyway, kind of exciting, but see, we were invited through RAIN. They were a sponsor and had some tickets.
Sponsor Bio in the Valley.
Yeah.
And Bio in the Valley is an association of folks that are working on microbiology startups all up and down through the Willamette Valley. And now I'm on their mailing list and I get invitations to other events. Similar vein. I was impressed by what HP is trying to do in terms of Cormick, in terms of making their facilities available for researchers that are doing all different kinds of microfluidics research so that they could do production scale trials of some of their processes and use some of the labs at the HP facility for their work. And they also were providing wrap around, from what I could understand, entrepreneurial support to those folks as well. So it was an interesting session out at HP.
Yeah. No, I appreciated being invited. It's going on. It's nice to know who some of the players are and
Absolutely.
and that HP is coming back. So, which I'm not sure is well known around the community.
Well, they're continuing to lay some people off and hire new people, so it's one of those, you know.
And they have a lot of contractors.
Yeah.
Opposed to
employees.
Actual employees, so.
But activity, I mean, as we will be their neighbors soon. And it's nice to know some of those empty buildings are have a future.
There's not much that's empty anymore. There's one big building from what I understand. But
And they're leasing a lot to incubators,
Yeah.
you know, so, and then in OSU, it's not just OSU, there are just
Well,
folks who are running a business and, yeah,
new scale.
yeah.
All right. So, almost 2 weeks ago, on the 30th, floodplain, Toby and some friends at the King Valley School. Very nice presentation. The Corps of Engineers person kind of went through the process and the floodplain maps in our area are being greatly revised. There were 200 people or structures in the 2011 floodplain map, and now there's on the new one there's 20. The map got a lot more accurate due to people complaining that, hey, this isn't. I've been here forever and it's never flooded, and it was done as well. This is ag ground, not very many people. We're not going to do a very good job of defining the floodplain, and due to quite a few complaints, they actually responded. So the Corps of Engineers is involved in actually doing the map revision, and then they send it to FEMA for they're okay. I think it's the process. So by the end of this year, the new improved floodplain map will be the one. Next day, 31st, open house at Children and Families, shiny new building, and that was fun. It was quite a few people going through. It's nice to see excited staff about their facilities, and just will allow them to do a better job. I think that's enough.
Well, thank you. I attended many of the same events overlapping with one of you or another. I too was really impressed by the Children's Family Mental Health Open House. I was sorry that I had to leave for another meeting, but it was a lovely event, and got a good opportunity to tour the building. I am going to look forward at a couple of events. The Youth Development Council, it's a statewide council of the Youth Development Office in the state, is going to have their meeting here at the Corvallis Boys and Girls Club this week. So if you have any interest in seeing what they do, stop on by. That's on Thursday. I will also be going to an IHNCCO board meeting that day. And I am curious to know, well, I'm also going to upcoming meetings. I'm going to go to the Philomath Chamber Luncheon on the 20th, which features Sharon Thornberry and Philomath Community Services. A couple of other things that are coming up. The AOC days this month are a little different. They're on Monday and Tuesday, and a lot of the meetings that I typically attend are on Tuesday during our board meeting, which is a little frustrating. I am not going to any of the Monday events or the Monday evening reception. I was wondering whether any of you are going to be there for that.
I meant to mention I'm going on vacation starting Friday.
Okay, so you won't be there either.
Out next
Okay.
week.
Yeah, I don't know why they shifted things around, and they were going to have a legislative retreat that week, but I don't think that's happening. I just am having a little harder time following what's going on at AOC now that I'm not on the board.
The legislative retreat, I think, is Thursday, Friday.
Okay, so they're basically taking the whole week.
Except for June.
Except for Juneteenth. Yeah.
I will also go to the Juneteenth celebration out at Lynn Benton Community College on Juneteenth. That afternoon. The CSC budget meeting yesterday was interesting. The budget committee did approve the draft budget for review and final approval by the full CSC board. But just a heads up that there are a couple of issues that have been daylighted through the work that's been done at CSC lately in terms of programs that are not making budget. They are finally now showing beginning balance and ending balance, which they did not do as a practice previously. And so the budgets are more transparent now. But the program that's most underwater, most challenged is Head Start. And that's interesting to me because month over month, those budgets are presented as, oh, we're doing fine, we're doing fine, we're doing fine. But in reality, for the third year in a row in the red, and that hole is increasing primarily because the federal reimbursement rates and state reimbursement rates have not increased. And because of the fact that CSC is a union shop and it's PERS, because it's a 190 organization, they just don't have the money. Most other Head Starts are nonprofits, don't have as high payroll costs. So that's a topic that will probably come up again for discussion at the full board level, because there's some policy decisions that will ultimately need to be made.
They're having trouble getting enrollment numbers up.
Yes, but I think that they're doing better that way now. It's not an enrollment factor because they have an enrollment number and they're under enrolled, but they're getting paid for that full enrollment.
Oh, okay.
It's not a capitated rate like the school districts right now. But they are kind of on a watch list, and if we don't get the numbers up within the year, then that payment will go down. And because of the challenges they've had with the program, they also are going through a full proposal this time around with the feds rather than.
The feds said they had to do that.
Yeah, rather than abbreviated proposal, and that is going to take a lot more effort and work, and it will invite even more scrutiny.
I was sort of wondering to myself if, high cost of housing.
It's a factor.
Possibly driving families out of that area.
It's definitely a factor. Families move away for work regularly, and they have the population that Head Start serves, that lower income population, is more transient in Lincoln County. It's the service sector population and the working in the fish plants and so on. They're more mobile. Anyway, so it'll be, I think, a more interesting budget presentation than we've seen in the past, just because there are some chewy issues there. That's only other thing that I wanted to highlight is that I noticed in the newspaper that there is a celebration of life for former Commissioner Jay Dixon on the 22nd of June. So that will be out at the home where he and Pat Dixon are living. Bonaventure. And I have the details if anyone wants to attend. Pat, you probably know about that already. That's all from me. Oh, no, one last thing. Urban Renewal District. As the liaison from our board to the Urban Renewal Agency, this is the first year that there's actual real money in the budget for the Urban Renewal Agency. So we probably will have a substantive meeting coming up in the next couple of months to discuss some options about that. I don't know. I think the initial view is that the Urban Renewal Agency for South Corvallis will be focused primarily on planning and design work for opportunities. They're not at a point where they can either borrow or bond based on the revenues. I need to accumulate a little bit more money first. But they're also staff at the city looking very closely at the ODOT Corvallis 3rd Street corridor plan to look for opportunities to implement more of that corridor plan. So that's where it is. They are a little bit ahead of where they thought they would be in terms of construction and down as Corvallis and revenues coming in. So that's exciting too. That's it.
I've got one additional, looking forward, July 16th, the Joint Committee on Transportation is meeting in Albany. I think Lisa Sheriff mentioned her part in that. And it's part of probably 12-stop road crew for this committee to get ready for the 25 session, listen to various communities and try to figure out what the needs are and how to develop a funding package that meets a lot of those needs. Similar thing was done in 2016 before the 2017 transportation package. That Benton County got a couple large items like the bridge and safety improvements on Highway 20. I think the idea this time around is maybe finish up some of the projects that were on the 2017 list that haven't been completed. The only one in our area that I know about is the third section of the safety improvements on Highway 20, the North Albany into things, probably turn lanes. I don't think there was as a extensive plans on that, but the other two legs took all the money. And so I think the theme will probably be taking care of what we already have. That ODOT is, the trend is in the wrong direction as far as what's needed to keep bridges and roads in reasonable shape, and the revenue, those darn electric cars, and that the gas mileage has gotten better, and so the gas tax, which is not indexed to inflation, keeps falling further behind, even with, I think there was a total of 5 cents added to the gas tax in the 2017 transportation package. But inflation just wipe those out, and a lot of times the federal dollars are for projects, major projects, but the kind of daily maintenance and operation doesn't have the dollars needed. An example of that was ODOT was going to last winter cut back on plowing the roads, and that got the legislature's attention and appropriated $20 million or something like that to patch that hole. But so trying to get ready for that. Haven't quite figured out the time on the meeting, but that is a board meeting today, so try to figure that out.
I attended last time around in 2016.
Okay.
And in hindsight, now that I know more about how the system works, it was clear that the investments for our area had been pretty well decided already. Senator Gelser and Representative Rayfield had had their say on the most important projects in the area. And so there was a lot of public comment, but I don't see that much of that public comment affected much of anything. That's just my personal perspective. But it was interesting to go. It was interesting to listen to what was on community members' minds. Yeah.
Well, and that's in the month before the meeting, trying to figure out what those projects are or how to have a unified approach do this. So it's not, well, I want this, well, I want that, you know, to strike some common themes.
Have you had a chance to speak to either Speaker Rayfield or to Senator Kelsey Bluen about priorities?
I have not, but I've tried to get an appointment with Speaker Rayfield and haven't been successful yet. But I will do that.
Yeah, be curious.
Well, and I know a couple of the legislators that are on the joint committee, and we'll check in with them
Yeah.
ahead of time. Because I think they've had at least one meeting in Portland and maybe a second meeting, so have some idea what how the meetings are run.
Yep, and I'm sure Rep. Conberg is fully engaged too.
He is not on that.
Not on that committee, but yeah, he has
But,
a couple of things that he's working on.
Yep. I have talked to him.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Nope. Any updates?
We have executive session.
I want
We
to
do have an
keep you
executive
from your
session.
lunch.
Exactly, well, executive session.
Oh, okay.
So, at this point, I am going to recess the meeting and we will go into executive session under ORS 192.6602D for labor negotiations. So we will be shifting away from the online meeting. Focusing on those listening them.
Give me a moment to figure out the technology.
Sure, and we will take a quick restroom break.
And I would also like to participate in the break if possible.
No.
Oh, please.
Executive session.